Chapter 356. Dean didn't pay attention to him as he followed the familiar terrain to the hiding place of Splitter. He had stayed outside the giant wall for 7 or 8 days. He didn't know whether Splitter had starved to death or not. 10 minutes later, Dean came to the plain where Splitter was hiding. He looked at Sergei and Gwyneth. "You wait for me here. I'll be back soon." He carried the bag of mutant beasts that he had hunted along the way and quickly left the plain. Sergei shrugged his shoulders and sat on the ground. He pulled out a stalk of grass and put it in his mouth. He softly hummed a tune as he looked at Gwyneth. "Don't look at it. This guy must be hiding some secrets that he doesn't want us to know." "Oof, I don't care." Gwyneth glanced at him. "Hunters are brainless like you. Our work is much easier." Sergei raised his eyebrows. "Like me? If they were all like me, they would have wiped out your stupid magistrate's court a long time ago. There are so many bad guys in the world, but you don't catch them. Instead, you catch us, who have no background or backing. I don't believe that those consortiums and nobles don't have any shady dealings. You guys know this too, but didn't you turn a blind eye to it? You waited until the truth was exposed before putting on show." Gwyneth sneered. "Ignorant. That's why I'm fearless." "Huh." Sergei pulled out the stalk of grass from his mouth and stabbed forward. Gwyneth rolled her eyes. "Childish." Dean went into the woods and looked back. He saw that Sergei and Gwyneth didn't move. He went to the abandoned building behind the woods. He looked at the bottom of the building and saw a faint red dot. He was relieved. He jumped into the basement and saw the tungsten cage. Splitter was sleeping inside. It slightly raised its eyelids when it heard Dean's movement. "I knew that you wouldn't starve to death so easily." Dean smiled. He opened the backpack and took out the mutant beast. He cut it and threw it into the cage. Splitter's spirit was aroused as soon as it smelled the blood. It opened its mouth and pounced on the bloody corpse of the mutated beast. Dean saw its panicked appearance. He smiled as he fed it. "I'll take you outside the giant wall to play. Your younger brothers and sisters are stronger than you. I'll raise you to waist." The little Splitter was engrossed in eating. It didn't pay attention to the human's mutterings. Dean didn't stay long after feeding the Splitter. He went out of the woods and returned to Sergei and Gwyneth. Both of them had their backs to each other. It seemed that they didn't want to see each other. Dean said, "Get ready to go." He looked at the sky above his head. His eyes flashed as he took the lead to go to a place in front of them. Sergei patted his butt and followed them. He looked at Dean. "Master, why are you always looking at the sky? If it rains, we will find a place to hide. What is there to worry about? You can't avoid some rain." "What do you mean? Can you not beat around the bush when talking to someone with my IQ?" Dean ignored them and moved forward quickly. It didn't take long for him to reach the hill he had passed last time when he returned to the fortress. He turned around and came to a steep wall on the top of the hill, which was covered with moss. He looked at it for a moment and then reached out to explore it. "Master, you are—" Sergei didn't finish his words as he saw Dean push away the moss-covered rock wall. There was a cave inside. Sergei was surprised and immediately followed. Dean came to the cave and saw some primitive human utensils. There were stone bowls and bonfires. There was a barbecue rack on top of the bonfires and a stone barrel. The smell of rotten salt and rotten meat wafted out of the barrel. Dean glanced at it and frowned. In this rough stone barrel, he saw half an arm and a few fingers. Sergei and Gwyneth came in together. Gwyneth was silent like a shadow. Sergei looked around vigilantly. After seeing that there were no enemies, he relaxed and looked towards the source of the disgusting smell. He saw the wet salt and the soup stains on the stone bucket. He raised his eyebrows and said, "These barbarians are just like the legends. They even eat people. I don't know if they're locked together with the undead. Who would be able to bite who?" Sergei's eyes revealed a playful smile. It seemed that he wanted to try it out. Gwyneth glanced at him but didn't say anything. Dean looked around and found that there was a lot of dust on the utensils used by the barbarians. He saw a black beast horn that had fallen from the rock wall. He picked it up and looked at Sergei and Gwyneth. "Do you recognize it?" Sergei shrugged. Gwyneth replied, "I don't know." Dean looked at it. He thought that during the cold weapon period, or in some remote and backward towns, animal horns were often made into horns. Was this also a horn? He wiped off the dust and blew on it. Immediately, a sound rang out. Fortunately, he didn't use too much strength. The sound stopped just after it rang out. I didn't expect it to really be a bugle horn. The barbarian seems to have already left this base. It seems like it's about to begin as I expected. Dean put away the horn, turned away from the cave, and continued to move forward. Sergei and Gwyneth followed him. The three of them arrived at the king's fortress after a few hours. This fortress has actually been breached? Has the barbarian army reached the commercial district? Is the war over? Sergei was shocked to see the ruined fortress in the distance. Dean said, "This is the king's fortress." "Ah, the one that was breached by the barbarians. I thought that the other fortresses had been breached." It scared me. Sergei patted his chest. Dean glanced at him. "Can't you even recognize the fortress?" "I've never been to this fortress. Why would I pay attention to these fortresses? They all look the same," Sergei confidently said. Dean rolled his eyes. He raised his hand to stop them. "Let's find a place to hide. There's a thick bush in front of us. It's a good place to hide." Sergei pointed. Dean whispered, "There is someone there." Sergei was startled. He immediately bent down and slowly retreated. After a moment, Dean found a place to hide. He sat on the ground and looked up at the sky. Sergei and Gwyneth squatted next to him. "Master, aren't we going to sneak into the fortress? What are we doing here?" "Waiting for the wind." Chapter 357. Commercial District, the middle gate of the protective wall. Auburn was leaning on the edge of the city wall, looking at the distant sky. Where the sky and the earth were connected in a line, a dark cloud of radiation was rolling in, swallowing the light between the sky and the earth. The wind from the black clouds was mixed with the smell of blood. He squinted slightly, and his dark golden eyes flashed with light. General, a blonde, handsome adjutant, walked over from behind. He placed his palm on his chest and saluted. "Everything is ready. We can start the battle at any time." Auburn nodded, but didn't look back. Adjutant Junlang slowly raised his head and looked at the legendary figure in awe. The latter was the commander-in-chief of this battle. He had just turned 40 years old and had already obtained 5 general stars. He was the youngest 5-star general in the military headquarters and also the person he respected the most. He considered his words and said in awe, "General, will these barbarians really attack in the next 2 days? They have occupied the Red Maple Mountain Range for 7 or 8 days and have not made any moves. In my opinion, they can enter the stronghold. There are abundant water sources and resources here. Are they satisfied?" Auburn slowly replied, "I also hope that they know how to be satisfied. But if these beasts are satisfied, then they won't sacrifice so many people to capture the fortress. They won't break into our territory. Their appetite won't be satisfied with this place. Even the entire outer wall may not be able to fill their stomach." Adjutant Junlang was startled. He lowered his head and said, "If they want to attack, will they attack from the slums or the protective wall of the residential area? We don't have too many troops there. I'm afraid that we will lose our defense if they attack from there. Don't worry, we have the boundary wall. Even if they break through the residential district and the slums, it will be useless. Instead, they will fall into a more disadvantageous environment." Auburn calmly said, "Go and check the barracks again. Tell them to be alert and get ready for the war. The war will begin when the thunder sounds." "Thunder?" Adjutant Junlang was startled. He was puzzled. Suddenly he thought of something. His face slightly changed as he retreated. Outside the fortress, near the giant wall, a group of knights in silver-white armor appeared in front of a stronghold. Among them, a handsome youth of 16 or 17 suddenly twitched his nose twice. His expression greatly changed as he quickly ran forward. Seeing this, the captain frowned slightly and called for the others to follow. Very soon, everyone arrived in front of the stronghold. Their expressions changed and turned a little ugly. "Bastard. It's really as the intelligence said. They were completely wiped out. Damn bastard." A few of the team members started cursing. Captain Kalen glanced around, his face covered with a layer of frost, and said, "Quickly go and see if there are any survivors." Yes. The few of them immediately dispersed and went to various parts of the stronghold to rummage through the corpses on the ground that were suspected to be alive. A few minutes later, the handsome youth shouted from a high wall of the stronghold, "Captain, come quickly. There is a survivor here." Kalen, who was rummaging through the corpses, quickly put down the corpses in his hands. He turned around and ran to the side of the handsome youth. He saw that the handsome youth was holding a primary knight of light in his arms. The latter's neck had a deep bloodstain. He didn't know how he was still alive. Kalen was surprised and happy at the same time. He quickly took out a bottle of water from his waist and handed it to the youth. "Wake up. Who killed you?" "We're the people from the investigation team." The young knight, whose throat had been cut, weakly opened his eyes and uttered a few indistinct grunts. Kalen quickly put his ear closer to the youth. "Yes." The voice stopped abruptly. Kalen waited for a few seconds, but didn't see any follow-up. He couldn't help but look up and saw that the youth's neck was crooked. He was dead. "Oh, bastard." Kalen was going crazy. He punched the ground. The handsome youth's face turned ugly. He slowly put down the corpse and said, "Captain, this person only has a wound on his throat. The rest of the corpses are full of wounds. When I found him, there was a person on top of him. I think it is because of this that he was not confirmed to be dead. The murderer is so meticulous. After killing them, he still calmly confirmed to be dead. It should not be the work of one person." Kalen slowly stood up. The other team members also quickly ran over and reported, "Captain, there are no survivors. They are all dead." Kalen's eyes were gloomy. "If there are no survivors, let the dead speak. You guys go and look at the wounds on the corpses. Then look for any clues about the murderer. Cole, remember the smell of the scene. When we find the suspect, you will confirm it." "Yes." The handsome youth solemnly nodded. The other team members also went to do their own things. "Captain," suddenly a woman's voice echoed from the distance. "There is a clue." Kalen was startled for a moment before his eyes lit up. He quickly rushed over and directly jumped down from the 20-meter-high rampart. His palms quickly slapped the wall to dissipate the force of the fall. After landing, he flipped over and rolled a few times on the ground before getting up and rushing over to a corpse in front of him. Squatting beside the corpse was a young woman with an oval face and a look of surprise and doubt. Kalen's heart shivered as he saw the clothes of the corpse. He recognized that it was a 3-merit knight and also a guardian of the stronghold. "Here, there are words." The young woman pointed as she saw Kalen. Kalen looked over. "The murderer is Dean?" The young woman was at a loss as she heard Kalen's murmur. "Captain, is he talking about Dean for the Temple of Elements? Or someone else with the same name and surname?" Kalen frowned and looked around the corpse for a moment. Suddenly, he exclaimed in surprise, his eyes revealing a thoughtful look. These words shouldn't have been written by him, but added after his death. The young woman was stunned. She took a closer look and suddenly realized, yes, no wonder I always felt that something was wrong. These words are written so deeply, and it's different from the way he was lying down. As she said that, she lay down on the grass a few meters away from the corpse and tried to write with her finger a few centimeters above the corpse's head. Although she could write with her finger, the posture made her feel awkward and difficult. Why would a seriously injured person use such a difficult posture to write his last message? She quickly climbed up and squatted in front of the body regardless of the dust on her body. "Captain, it seems that someone wants to borrow our hands to deliberately frame the person named Dean. Moreover, this person should be the architect of the Temple of Elements. The forces that want to deal with him must be extremely strong. Only such forces can quietly kill everyone here. Moreover, they have the time to slowly wipe out the evidence and destroy the wounds." Kalen frowned. "Don't rush to a conclusion. It is possible that the thief shouted to chase the thief. At present, we can be sure that the person who killed him wrote the words on the back of his fingers. There's sand in his nails. The person who killed him wrote the words in a deep way so that we can see them. The wind and sand couldn't cover them for a while. This proves that he didn't write it himself." The young woman said, "Captain, judging from the condition of these corpses, they died less than 3 hours ago. Why don't we first find the fatal wounds on these corpses and then restore the battle scene before they died to see how many murderers there were. All right, Kayla nodded. Go. The young woman immediately set off and went back to the barrier. An hour later, Captain, from the information we got from the scene, there should be 3 murderers without a doubt. There are traces of 3 people climbing rocks outside the barrier. There are traces of squatting in the grass in the distance. I'm afraid that 3 people can kill the entire barrier. I'm afraid that all of them are at the level of 3 merit knights. The magistrate won't do such a thing in the entire outer wall. The military is preparing for war, so they shouldn't be distracted to kill the people of our stronghold. The biggest suspects are the aristocratic consortiums and the devil apostles of the Dark Church. A middle-aged blond man said. From the color of his hair, it was obvious that he was an aristocrat. However, he didn't have the slightest bias towards the aristocracy when analyzing the problem. Kayla nodded. We have to narrow the scope. According to the handwriting found by Alan, no matter who wrote the words, the murderer is related to Dean. There's a 90% chance that Dean is the genius architect. Either he was the murderer or was his enemy. Cole, go and find architect Dean. Smell his scent and see if it is consistent with the smell of the murderer. Alan, go and investigate the consortiums that have a secret dispute with Dean. As for the others, follow me to check if the Dark Church wants to take the opportunity to frame our architect. Yes. Everyone responded in unison. Boom! All of a sudden, a thunderous sound exploded above everyone's head. Everyone couldn't help but look up. The sky was dark. Dark clouds were floating from the direction of the giant wall. It seemed that a rainstorm was coming. Now was the beginning of the black snow season. After the rainstorm, the temperature would quickly turn cold. The real black snow season would arrive. Rumble. As the crowd looked up, the lightning bolts dashed through the dark clouds like thick lightning snakes. Kaylin's face changed. Damn it, the young woman called Alan said. Move the bodies into the barrier and protect the traces of the scene. Don't let the rain wash away the traces. The others reacted and acted in a hurry. It's a bad time. Kaylin clenched his teeth. It's the right time. Dean looked up at the sky. There was a smile on his face as he heard the rolling thunder in the distance. He slowly stood up from the grass and looked at Gwyneth and Sergei. Our battle is about to begin. The clowns should step down. Now it's time for the protagonist to come on stage. Sergei was surprised. Battle? Are we going to join the war? We have to bring out our weapons before the battle. Dean smiled as he looked at the ruins of the king's fort. He waved to the two and turned away. He avoided the sentinels lurking on the ground. He came to a remote fort. There were only a few soldiers on duty. They were barely maintaining the basic operation of the fort. Dean went to a remote place. He dug the sand and took off his hunter's coat. He buried it in the sand. Sergei and Gwyneth saw Dudian's signal and took off their coats. Dean took the lead to sneak into the fort after burying the coat in the sand. Sergei and Gwyneth were surprised as they understood Dean's idea. They followed him and sneaked into the fort. Whoosh! Dean took the lead and went straight ahead. Dudian, Sergei and Gwyneth returned to the town behind the fortress. The town was empty and the streets were empty. There were chickens, ducks, and other poultry in the back of the houses. They were making screeching noises. Everyone has taken refuge behind the guardian wall. They are running fast. Sergei smiled as he walked on the street. Gwyneth looked from side to side in silence, like a passerby who had nothing to do with it. Dean picked a house and was about to change his clothes. He was startled and turned to look at the 8th house on the left. His brows suddenly wrinkled as if he suddenly noticed something. He immediately turned and walked toward the house. Sergei and Gwyneth were startled as they followed him. Dudian kicked open the door of the house and entered. He quickly found a corridor leading to the basement. He jumped down and saw a few linen bags piled up in the corner. There was a barrel of wine on the other side. Everything seemed to be normal, but he saw 2 red lights in the linen bags. He immediately went over and grabbed one of the bags. He threw it to the ground. Ouch! A woman screamed in pain. Puff! The linen bag next to the bag was torn open and a dagger stabbed towards Dean's face. Dean grabbed the wrist that was holding the dagger. It was a 7 or 8-year-old boy. He had freckles on his face and brown hair. His face was full of surprise and horror. Dean frowned as he exerted some force on his wrist. The boy released the dagger in pain. Dean threw the dagger to the ground and turned to look at the figure that came out of another linen bag. It was a 5 or 6-year-old girl. She had light green hair and wheat-white skin. Her eyes were huge and cute. Brother, are you okay?" The girl saw the boy fall and quickly crawled over. The boy rubbed his buttocks and elbow. He hugged the girl and bit his lower lip. His face was full of horror. His legs were trembling, but his face was full of courage. He didn't even dare to blink. Sergei and Gwyneth came down from the stairs. They were surprised to see the little brother and sister. Chapter 358. The boy's face turned pale as he heard Sergei's words. He stopped the little girl and said in a trembling voice, "You don't come over. I'm very powerful. Don't come over." Sergei smiled. "Blame yourself for seeing something you shouldn't have seen." Sergei's burly body approached the two of them. He stretched out his palms and lifted the boy's head. The little boy desperately beat his arms in pain. His facial features were distorted in pain. The little girl standing behind him was frightened. She hurriedly hugged Sergei's thigh and begged, "Uncle, I beg you, don't hurt my brother. I beg you." Sergei kicked the girl away. She hit the wall behind her and fell to the ground. She couldn't get up for a long time. "Leave them," Dudian suddenly said. Sergei turned to look at him. "Leave them? They have seen our people. Although I don't know what your plan is, but they will certainly make trouble for us if the news leaks out." Dudian walked over and carried the boy to the side. The boy was still in shock as he looked at Dudian. He turned and ran to the little girl. Sister. He helped the little girl up. Dudian came to the front of the two. "Are you siblings?" The boy looked up at Dudian's face. He couldn't see the slightest trace of anger on Dudian's face. He nervously replied, Yes. "Really?" The boy's heart tightened. "I'm not too sure. My sister has been with me since I was very young." Dudian nodded. "What about your parents?" "My father passed away a long time ago. My mother died of illness 2 years ago." Dudian said, "Everyone else in the village has gone to take refuge. Why are you still here?" "There is an entrance fee to enter the city behind the wall. I have no money, so we can only hide here." The boy nervously replied. Sergei sneered and said, "You need money to enter the city? How much is that? No matter how poor you two brats are, you should be able to fork out a few copper coins, right? If you really can't fork out the money, you can just sell some of the things here that you didn't take away. You're really stupid." When the boy heard his voice, his face turned pale and he hurriedly said, "No, it's not enough. In the past, the entrance fee was only 2 copper coins. Now that I heard that there are barbarians coming, the entrance fee has increased. Each person has to pay 10 silver coins. Although the things here are valuable, the owner of the pawn shop has already left. There's no place to sell them, unless we go to another town. But the journey is long, and if we meet wild beasts or savages." Sergei frowned and didn't say anything. Dean looked down at the two. "If you are willing, I still need 2 servants to take care of your food and clothing." The boy was surprised. He looked up at Dean and hesitated for a moment. I am afraid that we are clumsy. It's okay to be stupid. You can learn." The boy turned to look at the little girl, gritted his teeth, and said resolutely, "We are willing. Please take us in." After saying that, he pulled the little girl and kowtowed to the ground. Dean didn't stop them. He saw that the boy didn't raise his head. "Get up. But from now on, you don't have to kneel to anyone, including me." The boy pulled the little girl to stand up. He nodded as he heard Dean's words. Dean asked, "What are your names?" "My name is Gabriel." The boy pointed to the little girl. "My sister's name is Artemis." Dudian looked at the boy. "Bandage the wound and let's go." Gabriel hurriedly said as he saw Dean turn around, "Elder." "Huh? Can you wait for us? We have to pack up our luggage." Gabriel nervously said. Sergei sneered. "Untactful little brat. What's the point of packing up your junk? From now on, the leftovers of your food are more expensive than the best things you have seen. Do you understand?" Gabriel looked at Sergei in fear, but summoned up the courage to speak to Dean's back. "Elder, my parents left us a token at home. I want to get it, please. Go." Dudian agreed. Gabriel was overjoyed and hurriedly pulled Artemis along with her. Dean and the other two followed behind Gabriel and Sergei. They came to a laundry creek behind the town. There were several slabs on both sides of the creek. Occasionally, one or two small fish could be seen swimming down the creek. On the hillside behind the stream, a shabby wooden shack sat alone. Gabriel saw that her sister was injured, so she asked her to wait at the foot of the hill while she climbed up the hill to the shack and entered it. After a few minutes, she came out, holding a small bundle in her hand, and ran down the hill quickly. "Elder, I'm ready," Gabriel respectfully said as he led Artemis to Dean. Dean looked at the bag in Gabriel's arms and nodded slightly. He turned away. Dean looked for a few sets of clothes in the town. He asked Sergei and Gwyneth to carry Gabriel on their backs. They quickly went to the left gate of the guardian wall. Dean smeared a little charcoal on his face, pressed the bridge of his nose, and gently pulled it down. With a click, the bridge of his nose collapsed, and his whole appearance suddenly changed greatly. He looked mediocre and inconspicuous. Sergei and Gwyneth also used the same method to adjust their appearance. Gabriel and her Kate were stunned by this skill. Their small faces were full of surprise. "Stop!" The guard stopped Dean and others. Dean was prepared as he took out the badge of the Ryan family. When the guard saw the pattern on the metal, he recognized it as the emblem of a noble family. His expression immediately changed. He bowed and smiled apologetically. "So it's my lord. Please, please." He immediately stepped aside. Dean took the lead to enter the city and rented a small hotel. He asked Sergei and Gwyneth to bandage the wounds of Gabriel and Artemis. "Stay here and don't expose your traces." "What about you?" Sergei asked. "I'm going to the temple." Dean pushed open the window of the hotel and saw dark clouds hanging over his head. The hazy weather was depressing. It was estimated that many people were out of breath due to the pressure of such weather. "Go to the temple?" Sergei frowned. Gwyneth, who had been silent, said, "Do you want us to sneak back and inform the Ryan family? Although they have declined, but at least they can help us to inquire about the situation." Dean shook his head. "The enemy will keep an eye on them if they want to deal with us. At this time, we will expose our traces." Sergei looked at Dean. "Do you want to deal with the Melon Consortium by yourself?" Chapter 359. The rain finally came. The first rain after entering the black snow season poured down amidst the rolling thunder. The heavy rain instantly became a curtain, covering the sky and the earth, filling the low-lying areas of some dilapidated roads in the slums and residential areas. The people in the slums seemed to be facing a battle of life and death. They blocked the doors with sandbags to prevent the rain from spreading into their homes. No one expected the drainage system that had not been repaired for many years to play any role at this moment. All the soldiers on the wall were wearing military raincoats. They were facing the torrential rain in their respective posts, but their line of sight had long been blurred by the rain. It was difficult to see far away. "General, the rain is too heavy. You go in first," Adjutant June Lang said to Auburn, who was standing on the wall in a raincoat. Auburn's face was gloomy. "The war is about to begin. You want to go back?" Immediately passed down the order to everyone. "Brace yourselves and prepare for battle." When Adjutant June Lang heard this, he said in shock, "Battle? Will these barbarians really—" "Go!" Auburn shouted. Adjutant June Lang hurriedly turned and ran away. After a moment, an intelligence officer galloped to the front of Auburn. "General, there is a situation in the front. The barbarians of the Red Maple Mountains have begun to march towards the Golden Wall. They're very fast and are rushing toward the Golden Wall." The protective wall of the commercial district was also known as the Golden Wall. The residential area was known as the Silver Wall. The slums were known as the Bronze Wall. Auburn's eyes flashed coldly. "Tell everyone to prepare waterproof measures for the gods' artillery. Prepare for battle." "Yes." The messenger turned and left. Auburn narrowed his eyes as he looked at the white curtain of rain in front of him. He clenched his fists. Rumble. On the desolate plains, there was a dense black ocean that quickly engulfed the plains and dyed the earth black. The army marched towards the Golden Wall at a moderate speed. After all, they were still dozens of miles away from the Golden Wall. They needed to conserve their energy. Whoosh, whoosh. Outside the grassland on both sides of the army, some figures were hiding in the grass, secretly peeping at the vast group of savages. They were shocked. In their impression, savages were crude and primitive monsters that did not understand human language and did not understand human etiquette. However, at this moment, it seemed that these savages were actually wearing excellent armor and holding sharp and shiny weapons. They were just like excellent lions. Boom! Loud rumbling sounds could be heard coming from the dark and surging barbarians. Giant monsters about 7 to 8 meters tall were jumping around. They looked like toads, and they were covered in leather, scales, and other protective gear. It was obvious that they had been tamed and listened to orders. Dean changed his clothes in the hotel. He carried a bag full of papers on his back and hired a carriage. He drove to the station in the next block. He changed to another carriage and went to the Decca Mountain. Dean got off the carriage after he arrived at Church Mountain. He paid the fare and walked along the mountain road with an umbrella. There was no one on the road due to the rainy weather. The guard stopped him when he came to the castle. He was scared when he saw Dean's face. "It's Architect Dean. It's raining so much. Why did you come here?" "I've just produced an invention. I'm going to test it." Dean indifferently replied. The guard was surprised. "Invention? Haven't you already published your lightning rod divine art?" "It's a new invention," Dean said. The guard's eyes widened. New invention? He wasn't surprised when an architect produced a new invention. But who was in front of him? He was a genius who had produced a series of high-level inventions. Every new invention caused a huge sensation. When he recovered, he saw that Dean had gone far into the castle. He was stunned for half a second, and then suddenly reacted. He hurried back to his guardroom, picked up a pen, and wrote a letter. He wanted to be the first to pass the news. Dean came to his own building after entering the castle. Dean shook off the water stains on the umbrella. He leaned against the door and went into a room on the second floor. He came to a bookcase and took out some books. There was a roll of white paper inside. He took out the paper and slowly spread it out. There was an extremely precise and meticulous pattern on it. "The era of steam has begun from this moment," Dean whispered as he slowly closed the paper. He opened the bag and took out the blank paper. He put the paper into the bag and left the room. He went downstairs and shook the umbrella. He went out in the heavy rain and went to the temple. Dean saw a lot of people inside the temple. It seemed that they weren't wearing umbrellas as they were trapped by the heavy rain. They were sitting in various places and quietly reading books. Dean put the umbrella by the door and came to the counter. A young woman wearing a scarf was sitting behind the counter. She was wearing the clothes of an intermediate architect. She had a sweet smile on her face. She sat up straight as she saw Dean. "Are you here to submit your invention?" Dean took out the papyrus from the bag on his back and looked at her. "Yes, this is my invention paper." The young woman was stunned when she saw Dean's appearance. Her eyes widened. You're Mr. Dean?" Dean made a hushed gesture and blinked his eyes. "Mr. Dew, can I have your signature?" The girl immediately understood. She was a little excited and carefully took the paper. "Mr. Dew, can I have your signature?" "Yes." After a moment, Dean left the temple after completing the procedures. Dean left the Temple of Elements after leaving the temple. He sat in the carriage and returned to his castle. The rain was pouring down, and the raindrops created ripples on the surface of the Tyza River. The reporters from the various news agencies lined up by the riverside, waiting to enter the castle, were all forced back by the heavy rain. At this moment, the riverside was empty, but looking from afar, there were still a few sporadic reporters hiding outside the castle to take shelter from the rain. Their professionalism was evident. Those annoying flies are finally gone. Jake craned his neck to look outside the window. He heaved a sigh of relief and complained. Old Feline looked at the heavy rain. It's not easy for him to move around outside the giant wall. He should be ready to go back. Sander nodded and called a servant to bring a roll of thick blanket. He put on Old Feline's knees. "Father, the weather is cold. Don't catch a cold. You should go back upstairs." Chapter 360. The carriage drove into the castle. Several newspaper reporters who were hiding outside the castle were surprised to see the carriage. They were keen to smell the smell of excitement. One of them took out a notebook to record. The door was pushed open. Dudian came down from the carriage with an umbrella. He stepped on the muddy path and entered the castle. The newspaper reporters' eyes widened as they saw the face of Dudian, who had been missing for a long time. They didn't expect that the person who was at the cusp of the storm would appear at this moment. They rushed over and hid in front of the castle. They didn't care about the rain splashing on their hair and suits. They held the notebook and bowed to Dudian. "Mr. Dean, Architect Dean, we are Jane." Several people gathered in front of Dean. One of them grabbed the most suitable position. "Mr. Dean, did you secretly negotiate with the barbarians in the past few days? What is the purpose of your cooperation with the barbarians? Is it for money or power? I heard that you—" He didn't finish his words as he was pulled away by a person from behind. "What are you doing? I arrived first." "Mr. Dean, you—" He didn't finish his words as he was pushed away by another person. Dean smiled as he saw them scramble. "Don't worry. It's raining outside. Come in with me." They stopped after they heard Dudian's words. Noyce, who was waiting at the door, saw Dudian. He rushed to the edge of the door. "Master, you are finally back." Old Feline, Crone, Zendral, Jake, and others were surprised as they heard Old Feline's words. They rushed to the door. Dudian stepped on the steps and put away the umbrella. "Let's go inside." He shook the umbrella and handed it to Noyce. "You are back." Old Feline had just stood up, but hadn't reached the door yet. He saw Dudian, who was surrounded by the crowd. There was a trace of joy on his old face. "Why didn't you send a message so that I could send someone to pick you up?" Dudian smiled. "I've said that I'm just going to study new inventions. I'll come back once I have the results." "What's there to pick up?" Old Feline was startled. "Don't catch a cold. Lon, go and pour a cup of hot tea for Mr. Dean." "Yes," the middle-aged maid replied. Dudian entered the hall and looked around. He saw that all the members of the Ryan family had appeared in his castle. He looked at Old Feline. "Patriarch, let them go upstairs first. These friends from the newspaper want to interview me. Jean, give them towels and chairs. Don't let them catch a cold or get sick." "Yes." Noyce nodded. Old Feline looked at Zendral. "Let the children go upstairs to rest. Don't cause trouble here." "Yes." Zendral looked at everyone in the hall. "Hurry up and go upstairs to rest." Jake secretly glanced at Dudian. He waved to his wife and children and took the lead to go upstairs. The rest of the people followed behind him. In the blink of an eye, the hall was empty. "Here." Noyce handed the hot towels and chairs to the 5 reporters. The 5 of them were pleasantly surprised and repeatedly thanked him. They didn't expect to receive such treatment with their status. Before Dean came back, they were stopped from entering the castle to take shelter from the rain. But now they got the courtesy of a guest. He looked at Old Feline and said to the 5 reporters, "You have worked hard. Who wants to be interviewed? Ask one by one. My time is limited, so I'll give you half an hour. Each person has 6 minutes. Now, who wants to go first?" Old Feline nodded and said, "Who wants to be interviewed? Ask one by one. My time is limited, so I'll give you half an hour." The 5 of them replied, "Mr. Dean is too polite. I'll go first." One of the middle-aged men opened the notebook. "Mr. Dean, why have you been missing for so long? I heard you say that you went to study a new invention. Is that true?" Dean smiled. "Of course it's true. I swear by the God of light that I never lie. Forgive me, but the military newspaper has reported that the barbarians who were captured by the military confessed about you. If you want to incriminate someone, you can always find a pretext." Dean's face was full of righteousness. The middle-aged man was stunned by Dean's imposing manner. He quickly responded, "But this is a matter with conclusive evidence. Mr. Dean, what evidence do you have to prove that you have been studying new magic during this time?" "Of course, I have produced new inventions and handed them over to the temple. I believe there will be results soon." "You have produced it?" The middle-aged man was stunned. "So fast? Didn't you just create the lightning rod divine art last time? It's only been 10 days, and you've already created a new divine art?" Dean replied, "If it wasn't for the noise in the newspapers these days, then the new invention would have come out much faster. This time a new invention was conceived a long time ago, so the production was very fast. So, The middle-aged man slightly opened his mouth as he didn't know what to ask. After a moment, the middle-aged man adjusted his thoughts and asked, "Mr. Dean, even if you have produced a new invention, it doesn't prove that you have been studying it all this time. I heard that you colluded with the barbarians to get power and retaliate against Melon Consortium. Is that true? I need to correct you before answering your question. I didn't collude with barbarians, and I don't need to collude with barbarians. I have too much wealth to spend. Mr. Dean, I'm sorry, but your time is up. Next. Hello, Mr. Dean. I am a reporter from the Brief Reading Morning Post. I just heard about your new invention. I heard that every time your new invention is published, it will be snapped up by major consortiums. The pre-sale price is extremely shocking. If someone wants to buy your new invention this time, what price will you offer? Legendary item price. This is the lowest price. Thank you. Legendary item price? Mr. Dean, did I hear it wrong? The man was startled. Old Feline and several other reporters were stunned. They looked at Dudian and suspected that he had made a slip of the tongue. But soon the reporters put away their surprise. They would exaggerate their words to create gimmicks when writing news. It was hard to guarantee that Dean wouldn't use this gimmick to disturb the previous news that was unfavorable to him. The more they thought about it, the more they felt that it was highly possible. Half an hour later, Dean ordered Noyce to give umbrellas to the 5 reporters and sent them away. Dean turned to Old Feline after the 5 had left. I've read the newspaper. Although the New World Consortium is facing bankruptcy, but it is a time of war, so the bankruptcy filing procedure will be delayed for some time. The money from the sale of the lightning rod will be used to fill the hole. They will pay us back 1,000 times. He had read the newspapers for the past few days when he was in the hotel. The situation was similar to what he had expected. The only thing he didn't expect was that the New World Consortium would go bankrupt and the Ryan family would owe huge debts. But thinking about the means of the Melon Consortium, it wasn't surprising. Old Feline's heart calmed down as he heard Dean's words. He was worried. You came back too late. The Melon Consortium is dominating the general trend, and your reputation has fallen to the bottom, especially after the military newspaper was published today. The previous doubts have turned into one-sided accusations. You have aroused public anger. If it wasn't for the heavy rain, I reckon that a lot of people would have come to smash the door. Dean smiled. That's why I have to thank the rain. Yes. Old Feline sighed. You can still laugh at this time. Dean smiled. The enemy has gone crazy. Why wouldn't I laugh? As for the anger of the people, you don't have to worry about that. Since ancient times, for thousands of years, the commoners have been fools. What they see is what we let them see. What they think is good is what we praise. What they hate is what we criticize. How much they hate me now will be how much they love me in the future. Old Feline was silent for a moment. But the overall situation is in the hands of the Melon Consortium. Although you can contact Scott Consortium and Huashan Consortium with your identity and value, they can use their own newspapers to whitewash your name. But the newspapers of the military have completely dyed you black. What you say now is useless. No one will believe you. That's why I won't say anything. Dean said, black or white, let the world judge. I just have to do my job. Old Feline was startled. Do you mean the invention? Dean smiled but didn't speak. Dudian looked at Noyce after the rain subsided a little. Jean, go and bring Sergei and Gwyneth back. Yes. Noyce nodded. Sergei and Gwyneth returned to the castle after an hour. Gabriel and Artemis were also with them. Dean asked Crone to arrange a room for them. He called Sergei and Gwyneth. Both of you go to the Golden Wall and survey the situation of the war. Report back at any time. Sergei, Gwyneth, Old Feline, Zindral, and others were surprised to hear this. War? Are the barbarians attacking the Golden Wall? Sander was aghast. How could it be? How could the barbarians choose to attack today? Old Feline looked at Dean. Are you sure? Yes. Dean nodded. That's bad. If the barbarians attack us, we won't be able to explain ourselves. During this period of time, the newspapers will be focused on the situation of the war. No matter what we say, no one will read it, and no one will ask about it. Furthermore, there won't be any newspaper that will report about us at this time. This will cause public anger. We will be finished once the war is over. It doesn't matter if the barbarians win or lose. It will be useless to explain at that time. Old Feline's face turned ugly. He couldn't help but cough violently. Dean got up and patted old Feline's shoulder. Patriarch, don't worry. I'm here for everything. Old Feline's cheeks turned crimson as he looked at Dudeen. Dean, you must grasp the opportunity. We don't have much time. Sergei shrugged his shoulders as he saw old Feline's expression. Old man, why are you panicking? Who knows if the barbarians will attack or not? I have been with young master, but haven't seen the front line. Maybe young master is wrong. Old Feline was startled as he looked at Dean. Dean said, the war has just started. The military shouldn't have enough time to pass the news. I hope they can survive today. Otherwise, everything will be in vain. How do you know that the barbarians will attack? Old Feline asked. It's raining. The savages have been living in the radiation zone for a long time, so they are not afraid of the rain and have strong resistance. However, it's different for our soldiers. Even if they are strong, once they are drenched in the rain and do not bathe in time to keep warm, they will fall seriously ill. Moreover, they are fighting in the rain. Even if they do not die, they will definitely fall seriously ill. The barbarians have broken through the king's fort, so they have been aiming at the Red Maple Mountains. It's easy to defend, but difficult to attack. It shows that the barbarians have been planning for a long time. They must have very smart military staff. If I was the military staff of the barbarians, I would also propose to fight at this time. Dean didn't want to explain, but he saw that old Feline was concerned about the matter. The barbarians will benefit from fighting in the rain. If they are smart, then they won't choose to launch a general attack. Instead, they will choose to consume the barbarians. Barbarians will suffer losses in every wave of war of attrition. But the soldiers who participated in the war will be seriously ill after the end of the war. It will be difficult for them to participate in the new battle. If there are 3 rounds of attrition, then the military will have to replace 3 batches of soldiers. The soldiers who are seriously ill are no different from dead. Once the barbarians, when they will become a pile of grass targets. Old Feline was startled. Sergei, Gwyneth, Crone, and others were also startled. Dean looked at them, but didn't continue to speak. In fact, he knew that the barbarians would attack in the heavy rain. Another important reason was gunpowder. When he escaped from the prison, he discovered that gunpowder was one of the forbidden techniques of the Dark Church. This made him feel very strange. The Dark Church was an evil organization that specialized in the use of poisons and alchemists who use human bodies to conduct experiments. How could they give up gunpowder, which was such a terrible and lethal thing? If the amount of gunpowder was enough, then they could flatten the headquarters of the Holy Church. Such a lethal weapon was listed as a forbidden technique. It was conceivable that there must be a deep reason behind it. Although Dean didn't know the reason, but at least he knew that the Dark Church was helpless. If there was a way to force the Dark Church to not use gunpowder, then there was no doubt that it would be the military. But if the military knew about the existence of gunpowder, then he believed that there was no reason for them not to use it. This was a weapon used by the old countries to unify the world. Chapter 361. Crone, go and contact Huashan Consortium and Scott Consortium. I'm going to hold a conference. Dudeen ordered Crone. Yes. Crone nodded and left. Conference. Old Feline looked at Dudeen in surprise. Are you going to announce your invention? I've only heard about product conferences. I've never heard about an invention conference. Won't your invention be leaked? Dudeen replied. The temple has used the aura of the god of light to beautify it. I've submitted my invention, so there's no need to worry about leakage. I'm just going to introduce my invention to attract the attention of the people. The previous 5 reporters were mainly focused on the issue of him making peace with the barbarians. They thought that this was a hot topic, although he had repeatedly changed the topic to theurgy. These reporters who were sent to interview him seemed to be experienced elites from their respective newspapers. They did not get sidetracked by his topic. Therefore, they had to specifically report on the theurgy conference to divert the public's attention. Will this work? If the Golden Wall is as you have speculated and a war is breaking out, then tomorrow's headlines will be occupied by the war topic. It would be difficult to publish your invention, even if you hold a conference. It would be a waste of an opportunity. Old Feline was worried. Dudian said, so we have to create enough explosive points to attract people's attention. Old Feline was startled. Is there anything I can help you with? Dudian laughed. Take care of your body. That's the biggest help you can give me. Old Feline smiled. At this moment, a guard at the door ran over and reported, Old Patriarch, young Master Dew, there's a carriage from Deity's Templar coming. Carriage from the temple? Dudian was surprised. Old Feline looked at Dudian in doubt. Prepare to welcome them. Dudian ordered the guard. After a moment, the carriage stopped in front of the castle. 3 people got off the carriage. They were wearing the pure, white clothes of the temple. They respectfully greeted Dean. The leader was a middle-aged man with neatly combed hair. Architect Dean, I'm a reporter from the temple. I'm here to interview you mainly about your new invention. Please cooperate. Dudian's eyes flashed as he nodded. No problem. Please sit down and serve tea. The maid served tea to the 3 of them and brought over chairs. Oracle Dew, I just learned that you have submitted a new divine art. Can you tell me what kind of new divine art it is? The middle-aged man politely asked. Dean smiled and pondered. It's a bit hard to say what the specific type is. In short, it should be suitable for any field. Any domain. The middle-aged man was startled. Old Feline, who was sitting next to him, was also shocked. Theurgy was divided into 9 schools, and each school had 2 main categories of theurgy, military and civilian. Military theurgy was further divided into close range, long range, offensive, defensive, and so on. Civilian theurgy was even more diverse, divided into manufacturing, sewing, and so on. An invention that could play a very important role in a certain category was already a top-level invention, not to mention that it could be applied to any field. It was simply unheard of. The middle-aged man recovered and said, Architect Dew, aren't you exaggerating a bit? According to my 6 years of experience in the temple, I have never heard of any kind of magic that could be applied to all fields. Even the most popular plastic magic doesn't cover such a wide range of fields. Dudian smiled. I believe in your professionalism, but I hope that you can believe in my judgment as a senior architect. I'm not exaggerating. If I have to say which field I'm best at, then it's the military. Especially in large-scale wars, it has an incredible role. It's no exaggeration to say that I can easily slaughter an army of 10,000 as long as they use my invention. Old Feline and the middle-aged man were speechless. How could a team of 100 people slaughter an army of 10,000? This was a 100-fold difference in military strength, not to mention a frontal massacre. Are you kidding me? The middle-aged man was stunned for a long time before he gradually reacted. He couldn't help but say, although I believe in your judgment, isn't this a bit too exaggerated? It's simply a miracle. Are you saying that what you created is a legendary military magic? Dean replied, the temple will judge whether it is a legendary item or not. But I believe that the power of my invention is not inferior to other legendary items in the military field. The middle-aged man choked again. Old Feline was shocked when he heard Dean's words. Dean's current status meant that he couldn't speak nonsense. Once he deliberately exaggerated and created gimmicks, it was estimated that the whole castle would be flattened in an instant. Even if the magistrate came out to maintain order, it would be difficult to stop the surging anger of the people. Middle-aged man saw Dean's confident expression. He hesitated for a moment, but signaled to his assistants to record Dean's words. He continued to ask, Architect Dean, have you thought about the name of the new invention? What should we call it? Dean thought for a moment. Let's call it Steam. Steam? The middle-aged man was a bit surprised, but he still nodded and continued to ask, well, then may I ask, did you have a hard time researching steam magic? Yes, it takes a long time. It's a very complicated process. Did you come up with all your divine incantations yourself? Yes. Did you ask anyone to help you with your invention? No. The interview lasted for more than half an hour. The middle-aged man and his 2 assistants said goodbye to Dean and Old Feline. They got into the carriage and left. They didn't ask anything about your disappearance. It seems that the old saying, rumors stop at the wise, is very reasonable. Old Feline looked at the middle-aged man and the others leaving. Dean calmly replied, "It's not that they didn't ask, but they came to help me to restore my momentum." "Help you?" "I'm a member of the Divine Hall and a genius with great potential. I'm a rare figure for the Divine Hall. After all, the Divine Hall is under the command of the Holy Church. Although the Army and the Holy Church seem to be in harmony on the surface, it's hard to guarantee that there's no friction behind the scenes. In any case, the Divine Hall doesn't want to see me fall. Even if I die, it's just a loss of genius. But this time, the shitty hat that was put on my head is too smelly. It will even affect the image of the Divine Hall. A dignified genius of the Divine Hall colluding with barbarians will bring shame to the Divine Hall." Old Feline sighed. "Indeed, no wonder the weather is so bad. You have come to interview in the rain. Although the war will occupy the main cover, but at least there will be a page for you." Dean narrowed his eyes. "I don't want just a page. Outer edge of the commercial district, on the Golden Wall, under the lead of the captains of each battalion, rows of soldiers quickly ran up the city wall along the steps behind the city wall. The rain was pouring down, and everyone had a layer of military raincoat draped over their armor. However, in this urgent battle situation, it was inevitable that the rain would splash on their faces, necks, and hands holding weapons as they ran. It was just that the commotion outside the city wall was fierce, and the situation of the battle was urgent, so no one had the time to pay attention to the splashing rain. Ow! Ow! Chapter 362. Auburn's face was gloomy as he looked at the approaching army in the rain. His eyes under the helmet were full of coldness. "Pass my order to the God-Fire Division. Once they enter the firing range, immediately start the cannon. Be sure to kill the giant frog. Don't let them jump up." "Yes." Adjutant Junlang quickly turned and left. Roars could be heard from the bottom of the high wall. After a while, the barbarian army rushed into the trap area outside the Golden Wall. Immediately, a large number of barbarians fell into the trap and died. However, in this heavy rain, the barbarians' morale was high. They rushed forward wave after wave. In the middle of the army, there were monsters that were 7 to 8 meters tall. They jumped forward and quickly came to the bottom of the high wall. Fire! On the high walls, huge black cannons aimed at the front, and with a loud shout, the cannons suddenly shot out, and the cannons shot towards the barbarian army. At the same time, the archers raised their arrows and shot out, and an endless rain of arrows fell into the barbarian army. Immediately, the barbarians at the front were killed, and they fell to the ground in a messy manner, their bodies full of arrows. Boom! 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 Explosions sounded in the barbarian army. The soil on the ground splashed several feet high. The barbarians who were roaring forward were killed and injured. This war, which had been brewing for a long time, officially began at this moment. Auburn looked at the barbarians who were killed by the cannons and arrows. His face was still gloomy. Boom! Amidst the gunfire and the rain of arrows, a 7 to 8 meter tall giant frog monster leaped to the bottom of the high wall. The people riding on top of these giant frogs had long been killed by the arrows and fell from the giant frogs. However, the giant frogs were protected by protective gear, and coupled with their extremely tough skin and flesh, they successfully broke through the layers of attacks and arrived at the bottom of the wall. Whiz! The giant frog suddenly jumped to a height of tens of meters. Boom! On the high wall, the two cannons turned around and aimed at the body of the giant frog. They suddenly opened fire, and the moment it jumped up, the cannons hit its chest and exploded. The impact immediately knocked it away, and it fell on its back. There were 2 holes in its chest, and blood flowed out. After it fell to the ground, its legs twitched slightly, but it couldn't get up again. It was obvious that it wouldn't survive. Even so, the soldiers on the high wall were so scared that they broke out in a cold sweat. If such a giant creature were to rush up the high wall, during the time it took to kill it, it would definitely delay its attack, allowing the barbarians and giant frogs to close in. At the same time, various consortiums in the commercial district, as well as the Holy Church, the magistrate, and other forces, received two pieces of news one after another. The first news was that the genius Oracle, who had recently been in the limelight, had developed a new divine spell. The 6 consortiums who got the news immediately sent people to Dean's castle to prepare gifts. They were ready to visit Dean to discuss the advanced purchase of a new invention. Of course, the Melon Consortium was not included. Mel family. In the ancient castle. What did you say? Did he appear? How is it possible? Didn't he go outside the giant wall? Did he sneak back? Sarah Mel was surprised as she looked at the short-haired maid Lisa in the spacious dark red office. Lisa bowed her head. There is no news from the people in the giant wall passage. It is possible that they were delayed by the rain and couldn't get back in time. Impossible. Sarah frowned. The carrier pigeon was the moon crow. Even if there is heavy rain, it won't affect the moon crow's flight. He either didn't want to leak the news, so he bought all the people there, or he sneaked back. She suddenly thought of something. She took out a map from the drawer and spread it on the table. This map was the map of the outside of the giant wall. It covered the hunting areas of various consortiums as well as the 12 entrances to the giant wall passage. All of them were marked with gray areas. The closest passage to the Death Passage is the Scott Consortium's passage. If we go directly from here, we will enter the first hunting area of the Scott Consortium. There are monsters above level 20 in there. If we take a detour, then we will be blocked by the Ghostfish River. We can only enter the 7th hunting area of the Scott Consortium and go around to the passage entrance. Sarah Mel thoughtfully looked at the map. Did he expect us to deal with him outside the giant wall and deliberately chose to take a detour? But that is the entrance of the Scott Consortium. The hunters stationed in the 7th hunting area of the Scott Consortium shouldn't let him enter their hunting area unless there is the acquiescence of the superiors of the Scott Consortium. But how could the Scott Consortium allow him to enter their own hunting area and use their own passage? Could it be a condition agreed upon during the previous negotiations for the purchase of divine arts? She frowned, raised her head, and said to Lisa, "You said that he has submitted the new magic to the shrine? Go and investigate the process of him going to the temple. See if our people have noticed his whereabouts along the way." Lisa said, "Miss, I've already asked the shrine. Just this afternoon when it was raining, someone saw him go to the shrine to submit his new magic. Someone also saw him through the window. He walked up the mountain alone, carrying a bag with his new magic inside." Sarah was startled. She muttered to herself, "Strange. Did he really do it before? Did he send someone to disguise himself as the person who went outside the giant wall? How is it possible? If he has been inside the giant wall, then how could he not know about our big movements? If he knew about it, then how could he not refute us? If that's the case, then we won't be able to explain, and all the attacks will be useless. What's the use of him coming out now?" Lisa said, "Miss, is it possible that he was too engrossed in creating a new invention that he lost contact with the outside world?" Sarah slowly shook her head. "This person doesn't seem to be a simple person at his age. Moreover, it's impossible for him to not contact the outside world for such a long time. If he is really in the giant wall, then there's only one reason. He deliberately connived us to attack him and discredit him. But I can't think of any reason. There is no reason for him to do this." She shook her head. "Perhaps I am thinking too much. He's been outside the giant wall from the beginning. Moreover, he has cooperated with the Scott Consortium a long time ago. He was able to share the entrance of the Scott Consortium and then sneaked back. But it shows that he knows about the turbulence inside the giant wall. Even if he knows about the situation, he still dares to sneak back. If he doesn't have the confidence to win, then he is too stupid to think that he can rely on his invention to save the situation. Perhaps the sensation caused by his invention has made him think that as long as he produces a new invention, he can get the respect and love of everyone. Humph! The anger of the people has been aroused. This time, it is a matter of life and death for everyone. How can a mere divine art suppress it? He is too naive. It seems that I overestimated him. He is excellent in producing inventions, but when it comes to the military and people's hearts, he is too small. He is doomed to be bleak." She gently shook her head. There was a trace of regret on her face. Lisa said. Miss, I heard that the price of his invention is legendary level. Do you think he will really produce a legendary level invention? Chapter 363. Chai Family's Castle. What? Did he appear? In a room in the castle, Rosie looked at the messenger in surprise and said, Where is he now? In his castle. I know. You go back. Rosie put down the book in her hand after the messenger left. She went to the wardrobe and took out her clothes. She quickly changed her clothes and went out in a hurry. Miss, what are you doing? Prepare the car. I'm going out. Miss, it's raining outside. Go. Huashan Consortium, Krulov Consortium, Green Consortium, and others were surprised when they received the news. However, before they could calm down, the second piece of news that came one after another caused the various consortiums to boil. Barbarians are attacking the Golden Wall. The war has begun. How is it possible? Go and prepare the supplies. Our Green Consortium has the most advanced medical facilities. The soldiers will get sick after the battle. Go and reinforce the front line. Remember to record all the supplies in the account book and hand it over to the military. All consortiums were busy with the heavy rain. They had completely forgotten about Dean's appearance. Church Mountain, Temple of Elements. Inside, the majestic Lookout Temple. Carriages were parked in front of the Lookout Temple, guarded by the Lookout Temple servants. Aside from the Lookout Temple's flag, there was also another flag. These flags were all different, but each flag was a symbol of an illustrious identity. Grandmaster. At the moment, there were 7 or 8 masters sitting around the round table in the hall of the temple. Some of them were old and had gray hair. Some of them were in the prime of their lives. They were calm and full of vigor. Everyone, this meeting was hastily convened to discuss an urgent matter. An old man with protruding cheekbones said in a deep voice, In recent days, there have been a lot of negative comments about the new senior architect dean. Especially yesterday, the report from the military has undoubtedly made things worse. It has pushed architect Dean to the forefront of the storm and aroused public anger. The Temple Lord has commissioned the magistrate to intervene in the investigation. The truth will be made public. If architect Dean colludes with the barbarians and poisons the civilians, then we won't tolerate it. But if this is a misunderstanding and the military is maliciously suppressing us, then we won't stand idly by. Hearing his words, everyone looked at each other, but they did not say anything. The thin old man looked at the crowd. I have just received news that barbarians are attacking the Golden Wall in the heavy rain. The war has begun. Regardless of victory or defeat, Architect Dean will be destroyed by public anger once the war breaks out. We must help him stall for time before the truth comes out. What? Everyone's face changed. The war has begun. The barbarians are attacking in the heavy rain. Aren't they afraid of the rain? How is the situation in the front line? Can we hold it? Don't let the barbarians destroy the inner wall before we send help. Everyone was talking. Some were worried and some were surprised. The thin old man's face sank. Everyone, the barbarians will be repelled with the protection of the God of Light. We don't need to worry about the war. We have called you here to find a way to help architect Dean stall for time. Use the resources in your hands or the consortiums to help. In addition, the architect has submitted his invention. The information he has filled out is applicable to any field. Therefore, the temple has decided to let 9 masters from different departments to appraise it. Each group of 3 will make a score. Applicable to any field? A white-haired old man sneered. He's crazy. Even if he wants to make a gimmick to sell it at a high price, he shouldn't be so ignorant. I heard that every time his new invention comes out, before it has even been appraised, the consortiums would rush to pre-order it. Moreover, the price is frighteningly high. I heard that even before the lightning rod was released, the consortiums had already pre-ordered it at the price of a 4-star invention. Moreover, they were paying in advance. In the end, he rejected them, although it turned out that he would have suffered a loss if he had agreed. It is enough to show that his new invention is very good. No wonder he is so arrogant at such a young age, saying that he is comparable to a master. Another old man with a pointed beard said softly while stroking his beard. Another old man shook his head. he didn't say such words. It's just a rumor in the newspaper. He has offended a lot of people and deliberately discredited him. We have to think about how we can help him. After all, we have to admit his talent. It's very likely that he will be one of us in the future. The pointy-bearded old man glanced at him and said, "Discredit him? How do you know that it's a deliberate discredit and not a fact? Besides, if he wasn't arrogant, then why would others try to discredit him? If a person has a good moral character, then he will naturally be popular. The same is true in reverse. Moreover, I heard that he was selected to be a hunter. Even if he hasn't been a hunter for a few years, I'm afraid he's been stained with the devil energy of the hunters. No wonder he has a bad temper and is arrogant and rude. Yes, he contradicted me in public last time. At that time, he wasn't a senior architect." Arson, who was next to him, said, "Now that he is a senior architect, he will be even more extraordinary. If he becomes one of us in the future, he will look down on me with his nose." The old man looked at him and sighed. He didn't say anything more. The thin old man slightly raised his hand. Everyone, no matter what his character is, he is a member of the Temple of Elements. To put it bluntly, if something similar happens to any of you in the future, the Divine Hall will do the same to protect all of you. Of course, I believe that none of you will cause such a thing. But if the Divine Hall is not united, how can we work together to explore the mysteries of the origin of the world? In the end, he added, "Moreover, this is also the will of the Master of the Temple. Today, he has gathered everyone here in the hope that everyone can identify his divine art as soon as possible before the end of the war. In addition, you should try to use your connections to help him restore his negative image. We will hand over everything to the magistrate to decide. We will give him a fair chance to be judged." Everyone looked at each other in silence. Meeting adjourned. The thin old man waved his hand. In the castle, Dean was sitting in the living room. Old Feline had gone upstairs to rest. Only Sander was left to accompany him. Chapter 364. The hall was silent. Only the pitter-patter of the heavy rain could be heard. Sandro secretly glanced at the young man beside him. In this quiet atmosphere, he felt inexplicably restrained. After thinking for a moment, he hesitantly and carefully asked, "Young master, do you think we can get through this?" Dean slowly said, "The Melon Consortium is the one that will have a hard time." Sander was startled as he looked at Dean's face. He was at a loss. After a moment, the heavy rain stopped and the rain weakened. A team of Knights of Light came down from outside the castle. The captain of the Knights of Light was a blond youth. He saluted as he saw Dean. "Architect, the situation outside has been chaotic recently. We have been ordered to protect your safety in case of mob attacks." There was a trace of surprise in Dean's heart, but he was relieved. "Thank you for your hard work." Sander was pleasantly surprised as he heard the words of the Knights of Light. He knew that it meant that the temple hadn't given up on Dean. There was still hope for them to get through this crisis. Dean settled the team of Knights of Light into the castle. He asked the servants to prepare the carriage for him. He looked at Sander. "I'm going to the Knights' Hall. If Gwyneth and Sergei send back the report, then you can send a letter to the Knights' Hall." "Are you going to the Knights' Hall?" Sander was surprised. "Why are you going there? Do you have backup in the Knights' Hall?" Dean shook his head, but didn't answer. He ordered the coachman to set off after the carriage was ready. In front of the Golden Wall, roar. The murderous aura filled the sky. The barbarian army had already arrived at the city. The huge army was lined up in front of the high wall. Among these barbarians, there were actually primitive catapults. Giant rocks were shot onto the huge wall, causing great damage. Auburn's face turned ugly as he saw the scene. Those idiots from the intelligence department couldn't detect anything with so many catapults. Damn it! He clenched his fists tightly, his heart filled with anger. As the commander-in-chief of the guards, the responsibility on his shoulders was heavy, and the pressure on his heart was immense. Although he could predict that these savages would attack during the storm, it did not mean that he had a way to deal with it. However, he didn't expect these barbarians to be more difficult to deal with than he thought. When he attacked the Fortnite King, he didn't see such siege weapons. Moreover, he realized that he had greatly underestimated these barbarians. In terms of equipment, the barbarians were not inferior to the regular elite army. Boom! In the distance, a huge tremor suddenly came from a city wall. An 8-meter-tall giant frog suddenly jumped onto the golden wall. Its huge body immediately crushed a large number of soldiers. The soldiers who couldn't dodge in time were crushed into a puddle of blood before they could even scream. Auburn's face changed. He grabbed a microphone in front of him and shouted, "Reggie, send the heavy armored soldiers to block the giant frog. Let the purple feather army attack, and kill it quickly." His voice was transmitted through the pipe behind the microphone to a huge loudspeaker in another place. Not far from the loudspeaker, a burly man wearing a general's armor heard this, and his expression changed as he hurriedly roared, "Heavy armored soldiers, attack!" "General, it's not good." At this time, an adjutant ran in front of Auburn. "Kobe cannons number 7, 9, 10, 23, and 34 are all out of fire. The rain is too heavy, so the replacement cannons can't be ignited." "Bastard." Auburn's eyebrows furrowed as he gritted his teeth to suppress his anger. "Let the purple feather army take their place. No matter what, we must block the gap." "Yes." The adjutant ran away in a hurry. "Waste of the logistics department. Damn it. Damn it." Auburn slammed his hand on the city wall. His face was full of anger. In order to prevent the barbarians from attacking, he deliberately made another batch of holy artillery overnight. His purpose was to replace them when the fire went out. But he didn't expect that the holy artillery would be withdrawn from the battlefield before the war was over. Once the holy artillery was gone, the total output of the city defense would drop by more than 50%. It would be difficult to stop the barbarians' fierce attack by relying on archers and giant stone tools. The rain was still falling. In front of the golden wall, blood and rain mixed and dyed the earth red. The savages rushed to the bottom of the wall ferociously, but they were turned into hedgehogs by countless arrows. Wave after wave of savages stepped on the dead bodies of their companions and climbed up the wall. Their ferocious fighting spirit frightened the soldiers on the wall. For the first time, they felt the terror of these savages that they had banished to the barbarian radiation zone. Dean arrived in front of the Knight's Hall by carriage. There were very few vehicles on the street. There were no passers-by. There was a sense of isolation and tranquility. The carriage stopped. Dean got off the carriage and came to the front of the Knight's Hall. One of the guards recognized Dean. "Are you Architect Dean?" Dean nodded. "I want to become a knight and participate in the knight assessment. Please help me pass the message." "Become a knight?" The two guards were stunned. A senior architect wanted to become a knight? Dean was introduced into the Knight's Hall after a moment. The Hall of Knights was an enormous organization with an ancient history. It was on par with the Radiant Church and the Magistrates' Court trials. The Hall of Knights was an extremely powerful organization, and its spirit of chivalry was deeply ingrained in the hearts of the populace. Combined with the number of knights the Hall of Knights had sent to the Magistrate and the Radiant Church, the Hall of Knights had become the only organization that no other organization dared to offend. After entering the Hall of Knights, one would have to pass through a long corridor of knights. On both sides of the corridor, there were huge sculptures of the Hall of Knights, each of which was about 10 meters tall. These sculptures were engraved with the most outstanding knights of the Hall of Knights. These knights were either holding long spears, looking incomparably proud, or holding giant swords, smiling with their heads lowered, or holding a blade with one hand, looking domineering and majestic. Dean looked at them as he walked. There were biographies and outstanding achievements of the knights under the sculptures. "Mr. Dean, this way, please," the guard said to Dean as he came to the end of the corridor. Dean nodded and followed the guard. The huge golden door of a knight's hall slowly opened in front of him. Dean sat down in front of a tea table in the knight's hall. He looked at the ancient hall, which had stood for hundreds of years. After a moment, an old man in blue robe came in front of Dean. He looked at Dean's face and said in a respectful tone, "Dean, it's raining heavily outside, but you have come to visit the hall. Is there anything I can help you with?" Dean got up and smiled. "My childhood dream was to become a brave knight. I came here to see if I'm qualified to be a knight. The blue-robed old man had previously heard about this matter from the attendant, so he wasn't surprised. He frowned and slowly said, "Envoy Du, you are an apostle of the temple. You serve the light god and spread the universal love of the light god. Why waste God's love to be a knight? Knights serve justice, fairness, and justice. Isn't that what the God of light wants us to learn? So I don't think it's impulsive." Dean smiled. The old man looked at him. "Well, the Knights Hall won't refuse anyone to participate in the assessment. It doesn't matter if you are poor or noble, disabled or healthy. As long as you have the spirit of the knight, then you will become a member of the Knights Hall. Once you join, you will have to serve the spirit of the knight for life. You can't violate it. Otherwise, you will be wanted by the Knights Hall." Dean replied in a serious tone, "I am willing to defend the spirit of the knight for life. I will never do anything that violates the spirit of the knight." The old man looked at him. "Well, come with me. I want to see if you have the spirit of the knight." Chapter 365. Dean followed the blue-robed old man to the back of the Knights Hall. There was a huge statue in the middle of the hall. The statue had a giant sword in its hand. It had thick eyebrows and a majestic look. However, there was a touch of gentle mercy in its eyes. The blue-robed old man saw the huge statue. He put his hand on his shoulder and performed a standard knight salute. He came to the table under the statue and took out a roll of paper from a drawer. He turned around and handed it to Dean. "Fill out this test paper first. After filling out the paper, the knight's assessment will officially begin." Dean nodded slightly. The knights within the giant wall had gone through a long period of development. There was a systematic assessment system, which was much more precise and rigorous than the old medieval assessments. It wasn't just a certain amount of people's support and meritorious deeds to obtain the qualifications to be a knight. There were more stringent checks in terms of conduct. This was the main reason why the Knights Hall had been respected and loved for 300 years. If he couldn't pass this test paper, then he wouldn't be qualified to take the knight's assessment. Dean took the test paper and went to the desk. He picked up the pen and began to write. The blue-robed old man walked to the side and turned the hourglass on the desk. The sand flowed down. Dean had finished his answer by the time 1/3 of the sand had flowed down. There was a trace of surprise in the blue-robed old man's eyes as he saw Dean's proficient speed. He picked up the test paper and looked at it. After a few minutes, he slowly put down the test paper and calmly said, "Almost full marks. Good. You have the spirit of a knight. You also understand the etiquette of a knight. However, to verify whether you can really become a qualified knight, you need to look at the next assessment. First of all, the first point of the knight's assessment is that you need to get the love of 1,000 poor people, 100 civilians, 10 nobles, and the recommendation of 2 regular knights. Remember, you can't cheat on this point. If we find out that you have bribed with money, then you will be disqualified from the assessment for life." Dean replied, "I don't dare to blaspheme the matter of honor." The blue-robed old man's expression softened a little as he nodded. "That's right. It's good that you know. Our Hall of Knights has specifically permitted that as long as you can accumulate enough merit points on the battlefield and pass the first test, you will be exempted from all other procedures and officially become a Knight of the Hall of Knights. You will follow the Lord's will and become the Lord's sword." He paused for a moment before continuing. "However, you are the oracle of the Temple of Light, and the battlefield is extremely dangerous. I suggest that you go through the normal procedures. The risk is lower." "I know." Dudian nodded. "After you pass the first assessment, you will be an apprentice knight of the Knights Hall. The time limit for the assessment is 3 months. Remember, you must not do anything against the spirit of chivalry. Otherwise, your assessment will be suspended immediately." The blue-robed old man looked at Dudian meaningfully. "I would never dare to disobey." Temple of Elements. Inside the castle, Abyssal and 8 other masters of different factions came together. They were chatting with each other as they were ready for the next assessment. He had a very clear understanding about the task. There was an inexplicable feeling in his heart. There was no doubt that he appreciated the talent of the younger generation. especially the lightning rod, which deeply shocked him. Afterwards, he thought about the core concept of the lightning rod, but found that it was extremely simple. Instead of stubborn resistance and offset, it was replaced with guidance. Just like this, all the buildings in the entire wall are free from the trouble of lightning strikes. However, when it came to personality, he didn't like Dean very much. With his many years of experience, he could see at first glance that this boy was different from ordinary people. There were too many things in his eyes, ambition, arrogance, and many things that made him feel uncomfortable and even afraid. Intuition told him that he should stay away from this person. Although many people in the temple didn't believe that the extraordinary youth would collude with the barbarians, but he felt that it wasn't necessarily the military taking the opportunity to attack him. Perhaps it was true. This time he was invited to identify Dean's new invention. He naturally knew what it meant. If it was just an ordinary item, then there was no doubt that it would confirm the opinions of the military and the speculations of the civilian press. If it was a higher-level item, then there was a possibility of clearing Dean's name. But he didn't have much hope from the newspapers in the past few days. It's the first time that I've seen an invention that requires 9 masters to identify. Humph! Don't try to please the public. An old man with short brown hair said in an impatient tone, "Peter, that's because you don't have enough knowledge. Nothing is impossible. Magic is developing and improving. You're just holding on to old ideas." Another white-haired old man said indifferently. On his chest was the badge of a wood element master. The old man with short brown hair sneered. "I heard that the wood genius had created a lightning invention. Maybe one day he will leave the wood faction and go to Ibyssal's lightning faction. Moreover, he is exaggerating. I'm afraid that your wood faction won't be able to swallow such an ambitious person." The white-haired old man said indifferently, "This can only mean that the wood element is the king of the 9 elements. It is also the closest to the mysteries of the universe." Our wood element god envoys can easily reach the level of 4 stars by studying other types of magic in their spare time. This kind of thing has never been achieved by your wind element magic. Abyssal frowned but didn't say anything. The old man with short brown hair looked gloomy. He glared at the old man with white hair and turned away. At this time, a door inlaid with a strange pattern frame was pushed open. A middle-aged man wearing the robe of a senior architect came out and said respectfully, "Masters, the divine incantation is ready. May I ask who will go first?" "Me." The old man with short brown hair said, "Hurry up and go back. Don't waste my time." The old man with white hair indifferently said, "I'll go too." The old man with white hair indifferently said, "I'll go too." He followed the old man. "This is architect Dean's blueprint." The previous senior architect smiled. "I asked the 3 masters to identify it." The brown-haired old man snorted and took the lead to step on the scroll of paper that was fixed on the table. Suddenly, he saw the fine design on the snow-white paper. His narrow eyes suddenly widened a bit. He looked left and right and was suddenly attracted by a pattern. He carefully looked at it, and, at the same time, he read the small annotations next to it. The more he looked, the more fascinated he became. He muttered to himself. The old man with white hair and the old man with white hair looked at each other. They were curious as they also looked closer. A design with straight lines and fine lines appeared before the 2 of them. The 2 of them were somewhat shocked. This was the first time they had seen such a complicated design. They immediately focused their eyes on it. Water, burning, heat, steam, kinetic energy. The old man with white hair and the old man with white hair muttered to themselves. Their faces were getting more and more surprised. They were so shocked that they couldn't speak for a long time. Steam from burning water, producing kinetic energy under high pressure. The old man muttered to himself as if he was possessed. After a long time, he suddenly came to his senses. He couldn't help but clap his hands and exclaim in shock. What kind of magic is this? It's not water, wood, or fire. However, the combination of materials and usage of the divine incantation actually includes water, fire, and high-pressure wind. I've never seen such a divine incantation that uses steam as the base. the white-haired old man said in a daze. "According to what is written here, this divine art can hardly be called a divine art, but a vast new world." The old man with white hair was shocked as he heard the old man's words. "I know. This is the future world of magic that we saw in the new textile machine divine spell. This invention can be used in all fields if it is fully used. This is not a formalized divine spell, but a brand new kinetic energy, the most basic kinetic energy of every faction." The old man with white hair and the old man with brown hair retracted their eyes as they heard his trembling voice. They looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. As masters of the invention, they deeply understood what it meant to have a new kinetic energy. It was an existence that could create a faction. Abyssal and the other 5 masters were sitting on chairs in the hall. They were drinking tea and chatting. An hour passed as the door opened again. Abyssal looked inside and was surprised to find that the faces of the 3 people who had entered were full of emotion. Is it a good novel invention? Abyssal's heart was moved. "Peter, what do you think of this invention?" Another old man looked at the old man with brown hair and asked. The old man with brown hair looked at him and sighed. He shook his head slightly. "You can see it yourself. In short, I am convinced." Everyone present, including Abyssal, was surprised as they heard the words. How could a master of magic be impressed by it? Chapter 366. Time passed. Around 7 o'clock in the evening, the rain gradually stopped, but the dark clouds hovering over their heads didn't disperse. Every year the rain would last for several days. On the Golden Wall, there were beacon towers that were dozens of meters apart. Flames were burning. The fuel was stone beast oil and sycamore wood. They were special products of the military. The flame lasted for a long time and wasn't easy to extinguish. The majestic wall was brightly lit. Teams of soldiers ran along the steps to the wall to replace their posts. Auburn simply had dinner. He looked at the sky. There were no stars tonight. It was as dark as ink. He didn't know how long it would take to rain again. He turned to the adjutant. "Instruct the generals not to relax in case of a sudden attack. Also instruct the intelligence department to do a good job in intelligence work. Increase the frequency of replies from scouts." "Yes." Adjutant Jun Lang turned and left. "You tell the 6 purple feather armies to prepare for the battle. Be ready to attack at any time." Auburn ordered another assistant. "Yes. They want to rely on the rain to drag us down. I want to see which strategist came up with such an idea after the battle is over." Auburn's face was gloomy. His eyes narrowed slightly. He had been through jungle warfare, desert warfare, hill warfare, and dozens of small and large-scale wars in different terrains without losing a single one. However, this war was unprecedentedly important, and the disadvantageous environment was unprecedentedly severe. Although he had the geographical advantage, it was difficult for him to match the enemy in terms of climate and soldiers. He didn't have many trump cards in his hand. Evening. Dudian's study room. Dudian called Old Feline, Nicholas, Crone, and others. He told them his thoughts. After discussing with Old Feline, Dudian sat at the desk and thought for a long time. There was a trace of sadness in his eyes. He lifted the curtains and looked at the dark night outside. He didn't speak for a long time. The next day, the sky was covered with dark clouds in the morning. It was drizzling. The messenger of the post, draped in a raincoat, delivered the paper in the drizzling rain to all the subscribed households. The entire commercial district and even the entire outer wall of Sylvia were in an uproar as they read the newspapers. The barbarians attacked the Golden Wall, and the war bugles sounded at the border. This piece of news appeared on the front page of almost all the newspapers. Even the newspapers that only reported on finance or the entertainment news of aristocratic ladies occupied the headlines. It was irreplaceable. The news spread like a virus to every corner of the outer wall. The biggest reaction came from the residents of the commercial district. Some residents didn't hesitate to put on a raincoat and went to their neighbors' houses or the Holy Church's offices to inquire about the authenticity of the news. They saw that the Holy Church's bulletin board was also written about the news of the war. Yesterday afternoon, when the rain fell, the barbarians took advantage of the heavy rain to attack the Golden Wall. The battle lasted until 6 o'clock in the evening. After the rain stopped, the barbarians temporarily retreated. The military tenaciously defended the fort. The number of casualties was 26,200, 71,800. Dudian ate bread and milk while reading the morning newspaper. Although he had gotten the news from Gwyneth and Sergei, who were at the front line of the battlefield, but the key to reading the newspaper was the attitude and thoughts of the military. More than 20,000 soldiers have died in the past day. Old Feline was shocked as he saw the casualty data. Are the barbarians so cruel? We are relying on the Golden Wall to defend, but we have suffered such heavy losses? Dudian replied, how can we win sympathy if we don't lose some people? I reckon that the military will make a big move after the war. They're taking advantage of the situation to warm up. Only the fools will be kept in the dark. Old Feline looked at him and sighed. I have heard some news. It should be that the development of the magistrate and the Holy Church is getting more and more fierce. The image of the military has fallen in the hearts of the people. The residents of the commercial district want their children to become soldiers. They want to stand guard every day and receive a generous salary. No one would dare to bully them. If an organization leaves such an impression, then even if it isn't corrupt, then it won't be far from destruction. The military has retreated to the Golden Wall. It is a risky move to restore their reputation. Dudian said, this is a good move. If we can eat the enemy, then it will be a great victory. If we can't eat the enemy, then we will lose everything. The leaders of the military are much more bold and cold than we had imagined. However, I don't know if they expected that the enemy would be much more difficult than they had imagined. I heard from Sergei that the barbarians had used a monster called Giant Frog to attack the city. That thing can cross the wall as if it was walking on the flat ground. The barbarians have picked a perfect time to destroy the forbidden weapons of the military. I don't know if the military has other cards up their sleeves. Old Feline looked at his expression. Do you want them to have other cards or not? Dean smiled and said calmly, of course it's better than nothing. Old Feline was startled. Dean looked at the military newspaper in his hand and slowly said, through the data of casualties and the number of injured people, as well as the time of the battle and other intuitive things, people are aware of the tragic and difficult war. The strategy and the situation of the war are only mentioned in passing. I hope they will be able to control the situation in the end. Don't overturn the ship. Old Feline took back his eyes from Dudian's face and picked up another newspaper. This is an influential newspaper of Huashan Consortium. The news about you is under the war headlines. I hope there will be good results. Whether or not there will be a good result depends on the two of them. Dean's eyes were profound as he slowly said, is it Mr. Nicholas and Crone? Yes. What was the task you gave them last night? They haven't come back yet. Is it convenient to talk about it? It's not inconvenient to talk about your relationship with me. I just don't want you to worry about it. It's not enough to rely on the newspaper to create momentum. I told them to distribute leaflets and spread gossip. I don't want to be the punching bag of the people. If their task is in place, then we can at least get a chance to attract people's attention. Dudian said. Old Feline looked at him in doubt, but didn't say anything. Around 10 o'clock in the morning, dozens of figures came from outside the castle. All of them were farmers and civilians. They angrily rushed to the front of the castle, but were stopped by the Knights of Light. Get out of the way. We are looking for Dean, who colluded with the enemy. Let him come out. He has blasphemed the faith of God. Let him apologize for the dead soldiers. My son died in the war. It's all his fault. It's all his fault. Dozens of people were shouting loudly, and it was incomparably noisy. Dudian was sitting in the study room, reading the super chip. He frowned as he heard the noise. He glanced down from the window and saw the scene outside the castle. At the moment, several Knights of Light were blocking the angry people. Knock, knock. There was a knock on the door. Dean indifferently said, I heard them. Let the Knights of Light stop them. If you have time, then come out and get rid of them. Don't be afraid of a few unruly people. Sander, who was outside the door, was startled. He turned away and left. Dozens of people were crying and shouting outside the castle. It rained for more than an hour before they were forced to retreat. Dean quietly read the knowledge in the super chip. It seemed that he wasn't affected at all. Another day passed. Is the war getting worse? Chapter 367. Giant Wall Calendar Year 307, September 16th. The First Battle of the Golden Wall. The military dispatched 867 Dragon-class Weapons God's artillery to cover the entire Golden Wall. However, the continuous rainstorm lasted for 2 days. The God's artillery was extinguished due to the rain. It was difficult to display its lethality. The situation deteriorated after losing the God's artillery. Today, at 4:23 a.m., it was drizzling. The barbarians launched their 8th attack. It ended at 6:20 a.m. There were 12,700 casualties among the army. Dean quietly read the newspaper. He looked at the cup of milk in front of him and fell into deep thought. He had gotten the information from Gwyneth and Sergei about the frontline war. The information was more detailed and accurate than the reports from the military. Of course, there was no way for them to count the specific number of casualties. But they knew the general situation of the war. In the 8th battle this morning, the savages had successfully broken out of the encirclement. They used the giant frogs to climb up the high wall and created a gap. The savages continuously climbed up the wall and fought with the soldiers in close combat. The situation was very chaotic. After more than 10 minutes, the military sent out an extremely powerful army to kill all the savages who had climbed up the wall and blocked the gap. It could be seen that the situation of the war was beyond the control of the military and was about to get out of control. Dean could feel the anxiety in the newspaper. The military wanted to play big, but it seemed that they had messed up. It's the 8th battle. The soldiers of the military should have been replaced by several batches. Even if they are using the original soldiers, they are fighting in the case of high fever. The rain is like a large area poisonous gas attack. The military can't avoid it and can't prevent it. Dean's eyes lit up. The next battle will be more and more difficult for the military. Only the reserve army will be able to fight if the regular soldiers fall ill. If the reserve army falls ill, then it will be the Boy Scouts' turn. Although the ace troops of the military headquarters have not been involved in the war, if too many ordinary soldiers are lost, it will be difficult for the ace troops to resist all the barbarians in the end. The barbarians will inevitably invade the commercial district and cause panic. Military. Dean narrowed his eyes and tapped his fingers on the table. The rain was like a string, covering the world like a curtain of pearls, intermittently stopping and continuing. Another day passed in the blink of an eye. The 3rd day of the war. Dean was enjoying his breakfast as he read the military newspaper. The situation was the same as yesterday, but it was more severe than yesterday. There were heavy casualties, and even giant frogs broke through the Golden Wall. But they were killed by the soldiers before they could escape into the commercial district. Dean looked at the newspapers of other consortia. Some newspapers interviewed retired generals of the military and analyzed the current situation of the war. Some reported the situation of the front line from another perspective. The giant frog that crossed the Golden Wall was also recorded in the newspaper. There were also sketches and soldiers next to the giant frog's body. Through the size of the soldiers, one could feel the huge size of the giant frog. It was shocking. Dean looked at them one by one and threw them on the table. Then he picked up a red fruit from the fruit plate next to him and went back to his room while eating. Bastard, give me back my son. Traitor. Spy. Come out. Outside the castle, more than a dozen people holding umbrellas were shouting in the drizzle. The Knights of Light who were on duty at the door were firmly guarding the door. They repeatedly shouted to stop them, but it was difficult to make these people listen to them with words alone. Also, due to their chivalry, they could not attack the innocent, weak, and civilians, so they could only remain silent. Dean glanced at them and closed the window. He continued to use the super chip to study. In the evening, there was a commotion outside the castle. The captain of the Knights of Light quickly came to the dining room and said to Dean, "Elder, the people from the military have come to take people. We have no right to stop them." Take people? Dean frowned. Let them in. Yes. The youth was relieved as he turned away. After a moment, a team of people wearing commander's armor came into the hall. They had swords on their waists. Most of them showed a bit of contempt when they saw Dean in the dining hall. You are Dean. We have received orders to take 2 people from your New World Consortium. One is called Gwyneth, and the other one is called Sergei. The middle-aged man in military uniform said in a cold tone. Old Feline, Sandro, Jake, and the juniors were surprised to see this group of people. The juniors shivered as they saw the murderous aura exuding from the black armors of the soldiers. Dean narrowed his eyes. Nicholas, tell them what to do when they enter my house. Nicholas's face changed. He didn't expect that Dean would be so tough in such a bad situation, but he didn't dare to persuade them. He stepped forward and said to the men in military uniform, You are not allowed to wear swords in the castle of my young master. My young master is an architect of the Temple of Elements. It's rude of you to offend him. The middle-aged man in military uniform sneered. Rude? If the magistrate hadn't found any direct evidence, I would have already captured him. Architect? Pooh! As he said that, he spat on the wooden floor. Nicotine's expression changed as he angrily said, You! Old Feline and Sandro didn't expect the military to be so barbaric and strong. Their faces slightly changed as they looked at Dean. Dean sat on the chair and stared at the middle-aged man. He didn't look at the spit on the floor. He said in a very calm but very serious tone, I advise you to clean it or I will make you lick it back. Ha ha! The middle-aged man in military uniform laughed. The young men behind him also laughed. There was no trace of fear in them. Their laughter echoed in all directions in the quiet dining room. Dean looked at them for a moment. There was a trace of smile on his face. He slowly got up and left the table. He walked step by step towards the middle-aged man in military uniform until he was half a meter away from the middle-aged man. At this time, the middle-aged man in military uniform stopped laughing. He looked down at Dean, who was half a head lower than him. Architect, I'm a rough man. You're standing so close to me. Don't blame me if I turn around and accidentally injure you. Ha ha! The young men in military uniform laughed. Dean smiled. I also want to say the same thing. He raised his palm and clenched his fingers into a fist. His movements seemed to be in slow motion. However, the middle-aged man and the others in front of him seemed to be even slower. A surprised expression emerged on their faces. The next moment, under the watchful eyes of the middle-aged man, Dean's clenched fist seemed to carry a huge force of millions of tons as it hit the middle-aged man's chest very quickly and very slowly. The middle-aged man in military uniform was startled. Ka! The sound of bones breaking echoed. Boom! The whole body of the middle-aged man in military uniform suddenly flew upside down. 4 or 5 young men in military uniform behind him were smashed and fell to the ground. Dean slowly retracted his fist and walked step by step towards the middle-aged man in military uniform. The middle-aged man in military uniform had a pained expression on his face. He supported himself with one hand and tried to get up, but when he exerted a bit of force with his arm, it affected the muscles in his chest, causing him to feel a tearing pain. He sucked in a breath of cold air and rolled his eyes. Dean grabbed the middle-aged man's shoulder and twisted it. Gotcha! The shoulder was dislocated. He grabbed the other shoulder and also dislocated it. Then he grabbed the middle-aged man's hair and dragged it to the floor where he had spat. He slowly squatted down and put the middle-aged man's head on the floor where he had spat. The middle-aged man in military uniform rubbed his face against the smooth floor, up and down. Captain! The 2 young men in military uniforms saw this scene and roared in anger. They suddenly pulled out the sword from their waists and waved them toward Dean. It seemed that they had completely forgotten that the teenager in front of them was a distinguished architect of the temple. Not to mention cutting him. Even if a hair was hurt, it would be a big deal. A cold light flashed in Dean's eyes when he saw the 2 of them move their swords. Before the swords came, his hands were as fast as lightning, and he suddenly intercepted their elbows. Gotcha! The arms of the 2 youths holding the swords were suddenly broken. They couldn't hold the swords and screamed in pain. Dean took a step forward and pressed his hands on their faces. He pushed them away with force. The two young men's feet were lifted off the ground. It was as if they had been hit by a train. They flew backward and pressed down the other three young men who were about to get up. Dean indifferently glanced at them. He turned and squatted down. He stuffed the scarf from the collar of the middle-aged man in military uniform into his mouth to block his screams. Then he pulled the middle-aged man's ears and whispered, "The reason why a tiger is because it is still the king of beasts when it is asleep. Do you understand?" Chapter 368. The middle-aged man's pupils shrank as he heard the boy's words. His face was full of pain and shock. In his impression, the architects of the Temple of Elements were frail people. However, the strength and speed that the boy in front of him had shown was more terrible than any of the colonel-level generals that he had seen before. Dudian glanced at the middle-aged man's face. His fingers loosened and the middle-aged man's head heavily hit the wooden floor. Both of his hands were dislocated and his chest was in pain. His upper body was almost paralyzed. He couldn't exert even half of his strength. Dudian picked out the towel from the middle-aged man's mouth. Then he pressed the man's shoulders. He slightly twisted and pushed the man's arms back. His technique was extremely skilled. "I will hand over the people. Tomorrow they will go to the military to report. If the military comes again, I hope you can remind them that if they don't abide by my rules, then they better not step into my territory. Next time they won't be so lucky." Dudian stood up and clapped his hands. He lifted his foot and stepped over the middle-aged man's head. He went back to the dining table. He directly ignored the dumbfounded expressions of the juniors on both sides of the table. He reached out to Nicholas. Nicholas was startled. He understood from Dudian's expression and handed over a clean towel. There was a trace of approval in Dudian's eyes. He took the towel and wiped his fingers. Every finger was extremely clean. He returned the towel to Nicholas and said, "Send the guest out." "Yes." There was a trace of a bitter smile on Nicholas's face. The middle-aged man stood up from the ground. His face was very ugly. His eyes were filled with hidden ruthlessness as he stared at Dudian. He turned around and said, "Let's go." The other young men covered their wounds and tried to endure the pain. They looked at Dean in horror and turned to follow the middle-aged man. They didn't say a word. Dudian held the knife and looked around the table. "Let's continue the dinner. The food is cold. Tell the chef to heat it up." The juniors quickly bowed their heads. They didn't dare to look at Dudian's eyes. Old Feline wryly smiled but didn't say anything. Dudian returned to the study room after the meal. Old Feline came in with Sanders' help. Old Feline sat on the chair next to him and smiled. "Today you injured an officer. I'm afraid they will say bad things about you when they go back. If the contradiction intensifies in this critical period, it will inevitably be disadvantageous to you. Why are you so impulsive?" If next time, Dean looked at him, "You and I aren't sure if there is someone behind them who is deliberately testing our bottom line. If so, then I will let the people behind them see where my bottom line is. If not, it doesn't matter. I'll do it, and I'll feel comfortable. Don't you nobles hate hunters? You think hunters are too dangerous, cruel, and ruthless?" Dudian smiled. "But anyone who has experienced many life and death situations will cherish their life and respect themselves more. So these clowns aren't qualified for me to endure." Old Feline was startled. "I know. You are right. I have too many concerns. The world outside the giant wall has taught you how to live freely." Dean smiled and handed the letter to Sander. "Let Sergei and Gwyneth come back. Tell Mr. Nicholas to get ready. He will replace Sergei and Gwyneth in the front line. We have to get first-hand information about the war. We don't have to wait for the newspapers to tell us." "Let Mr. Nicholas go?" Sander was surprised. "He is stronger than you think." "Oh, I know. I'll go." Sander turned and left the study room. He gently closed the door without making a sound. Dudian opened the curtains and looked at the dark night outside. At the moment, there was still a drizzle. The windows were half closed and the cold wind was blowing in. Dudian wasn't afraid of the cold, but old Feline was in the room. He wanted to get some fresh air, but he still closed the window. He looked at old Feline. "When he comes back, ask him to ask the servants to prepare some charcoal for you. The fireplace in your room has been cleaned." "Winter?" Old Feline was startled. He smiled. Do you mean the black snow season? I always hear strange words coming out of your mouth. I don't know where you learned them. Is it the name of the black snow season in the slums? Dean smiled but didn't answer. Old Feline saw his smile and sighed. You have something on your mind. Don't keep it to yourself. Tell me about it. Although I'm old and I may not be able to help you, but at least I can share some of your pressure. Dean shook his head. I don't have any pressure, but I didn't expect the appetite of the military to be bigger than I thought. I thought that they had messed up, but now it seems that they are much calmer than all of us. Oh, what do you mean? When the war breaks out, there's often a forced conscription due to a lack of manpower. But all the able-bodied men will be pushed to the front line of the battlefield. Dean sighed, but this time the military isn't aiming at the civilians. They want to weaken the forces of the 6 consortiums. I'm sure that the military won't just forcibly recruit our New World Consortium's hunters. None of the other consortiums will be spared either. Under such special circumstances, if the consortiums resist stubbornly, they will have to face the military's enforcement. Without the support of the people, the consortiums won't be able to resist even if they are suppressed by the military. After all, the consortiums are just a collection of chambers of commerce. They are just a group of upper-class businessmen. Dean sighed. The people are really strange. You say that they are useful, but they are ignorant and incompetent. They're like a group of lambs waiting to be slaughtered. You say that they are useless, but no forces dare to lose the hearts of the people. Public opinion is like a boat on a stormy sea. It will capsize in the blink of an eye. Speaking of this, the Holy Church is the smartest. Old Feline was startled as he heard Dean's slightly sentimental tone. He suddenly thought that the teenager in front of him had just turned 16 years old. Generally, other people at this age were ignorant of the world's affairs. They would play all day long. But he had become an existence that could compete with the 6 consortiums, the military, and even the Holy Church. That's why I said that we can't arouse public anger and lose the hearts of the people. Old Feline said, my father once said that although the civilians are lowly, but they're the cornerstone of the aristocracy. If the family wants to prosper, then we can't lose the hearts of the people. Therefore, our Ryan family had a low attitude towards the civilians. It's also related to my father's teachings. Dean looked out of the window, but someone will soon lose the hearts of the people. Let's see the performance of the military. Old Feline was startled. He looked at Dean's eyes and looked out of the window into the dark night. The darkness was getting thicker. The next morning, Dean got up on time and sat in the dining room to eat breakfast. He was waiting for the newspaper to arrive. At this time, Sergei and Gwyneth came down from upstairs and greeted Dean. Remember what I said last night. Your life is the first priority. Dean stared at the steak on the plate. He gently cut it with a knife. I won't have time to collect the body if I die. Sergei grinned and said, I know. We've already taken out our steel nails, so this kind of battle is nothing to us. Let's not talk about anything else, but staying alive is definitely not a problem. By the way, why are you eating so greasy so early in the morning? Chapter 369. When Sergei and Gwyneth came to the Golden Wall again, they found that they couldn't recognize the wall anymore. The wall was full of corpses, and under the wall were corpses that they didn't have time to clean up. At this moment, from the other side of the wall came a tsunami-like roar. The roar was full of ferocious emotions. Their hearts were stimulated by the strong sound wave. They violently contracted and accelerated the blood flow in their body. They couldn't help but feel their blood boiling. Boom! Just as the two of them alighted from the carriage, a loud roar suddenly sounded from the high wall in front of them. They saw a giant frog that was 7 to 8 meters tall jump up the high wall, its huge body sweeping left and right in the crowd. Many soldiers were swept by its long tongue and flew high up into the air. They screamed in fear as they fell off the high wall and fell to the ground like sandbags. Their screams were instantly silenced. Sergei and Gwyneth looked at each other. They could see the seriousness in each other's eyes. Even senior hunters like them had a very high risk of dying in such a war. New World Consortium? Go! Go! Gather there! A A young man wearing a military uniform with a lieutenant medal saw Sergei and Gwyneth and loudly shouted. Sergei's eyes flashed with killing intent as he clenched his fists. However, his huge fist was grabbed by a soft and slender hand. He turned his head and saw Gwyneth slightly shaking her head at him. He immediately suppressed his anger and went to the barracks to gather according to the instructions of the young officer. On the wall, Auburn looked at the barbarian army. Have all the consortia's hunters been mobilized? They have gathered at the barracks. Adjutant Junlang replied. Separate the hunters into a separate formation. Let them follow a battalion and go out of the city. Auburn coldly said. Yes. Adjutant Junlang was surprised, but he didn't dare to neglect. He quickly turned and left. At the same time he left, another adjutant ran over and said, General, we don't have enough arrows. Auburn frowned. Do you need to tell me about such a trivial matter? Let the general of the archery department solve it himself. If we don't have enough, then let them buy from consortia. Idiots. Obviously, they're going to fight a protracted war. Don't prepare more arrows in advance. Yes. The adjutant didn't dare to say more as he turned and ran. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The barbarian army hit the high wall with boulders. Some soldiers didn't dodge in time and were smashed into a pool of blood. The boulder's destructive power was so great that it created a huge pit on the high wall. Bang! Suddenly, a high wall that was already full of cracks was smashed open under the attack of the giant rock. The stones that were used to build the wall fell down, revealing a huge gap. Roar! The barbarians at the front saw this gap and immediately pounced over like a bull in heat. When a middle-aged major general stationed here saw this scene, his expression changed, and he hurriedly said, Quick, release the arrows. The heavy-armored guards block. Roar! The savages at the bottom of the wall were like a group of ants. They climbed up the high wall, piling on top of each other. The savages that rushed up first were immediately knocked down by the heavy shields of the heavy armor guards, or killed by the arrows. However, the savages that rushed up later seized the time when the archers were reloading their arrows and stepped onto the high wall. When the first savages stepped onto the wall, the second, third, and even more savages quickly rushed over the high wall. The width of the wall was limited. The defending soldiers were quickly overwhelmed by the barbarians. Whoosh! Arrows flew over, and a group of people wearing purple armor rushed into the battlefield. The ones who rushed at the front were a few knights with long spears in their hands. After jumping into the gap in the wall, they swept their spears horizontally. Like wolves entering a flock of sheep, Dawn swept through the densely packed barbarians and created an empty circle. Together with the arrows that followed, they immediately killed the rest of the barbarians. Roar! The barbarians were still climbing from the outside of the wall. These people dressed in purple armor were agile and powerful. One of them was enough to block 100 enemies. They quickly blocked the gap and made it difficult for the barbarians to take even half a step onto the high wall. The rain was still falling as the war continued. Half an hour passed. Amidst the endless stream of barbarians, a few barbarians with red skin suddenly jumped up. Their faces were ferocious, and their hair was flying in the air. Red cracks appeared on their faces, as though blood vessels were floating on their cheeks. It was as though there was a volcano hidden in their bodies, and it was about to explode, spewing magma everywhere. Roar! These red barbarians let out beastly roars and rushed towards the purple armored soldiers. They were extremely fast. With a bang, a red barbarian pushed a purple armored soldier to the ground and opened his mouth to bite the other's face. Poo-pee-you! A few purple armored soldiers at the side hurriedly came to his rescue. They stabbed their spears and immediately pierced a few holes in the red-skinned savage's body. However, the savage did not die. He roared and pounced on him. When a few purple armored soldiers worked together to lift him up with their spears, they saw that his companion, who was pinned to the ground, had been bitten into a bloody mess. His nose and cheeks were bitten into pieces, and there was a huge hole in his throat. It was obvious that he would not survive. Roar! The red barbarians rushed into the purple armored soldiers and created chaos. General, there is a gap in the seventh wall. The number of purple feather armies stationed, there is not enough. We need help. A messenger ran over and reported to Auburn. Auburn's face slightly changed as he said in a low voice, "Send another purple feather army. In addition, tell the soldiers to prepare to take the Herculean pill and defend at all costs until reinforcements arrive." Yes. At noon, Dean was reading the afternoon newspaper in the castle. Compared to the morning newspaper, the sales and audience of the afternoon and evening newspapers weren't high. Usually, only the major events of the day would attract people's attention. In recent days, the situation of the war had changed all the time. Therefore, the afternoon newspaper and evening newspaper had become the main source of information. Especially after the first 2 days, people were used to paying attention to the war. After all, judging from the current situation, the situation wasn't looking good. The barbarians had occupied the Red Maple Mountains and destroyed some of the surrounding towns and villages. The newspapers had already published the tragedy of the Red Maple Mountains. If the Golden Wall wasn't able to hold, then the entire commercial district and even the entire outer wall would suffer the same fate. The military is really ruthless. The hunters of the 6 consortiums add up to about 1,000 people. Most of them are primary hunters. If they go out of the city to fight, their role is no different from cannon fodder. It's already so difficult to fight, but they still can't trust these hunters. Dean's eyes narrowed, and there was a trace of cold light flash through his eyes. The Purple Feather Army can't stop the barbarians. You have to support me. He gently rubbed his fingers as he fell into deep thought. The military evening newspaper was released that night. Heavy casualties. I'm afraid that the Golden Wall will be lost. The military will establish a second line of defense behind the Red River. The inner wall has sent a message that reinforcements will be sent. Dean looked at the eye-catching headlines in the newspaper. He pondered for a moment before putting away the newspaper. He turned to the newspapers of the other consortiums. All of them were reporting about the war. They were analyzing the situation from different perspectives. Although they had to admit that the current situation was difficult, but they were trying to find reasons and possibilities to defend the Golden Wall. They were trying to appease the civilians and avoid creating panic or riots. This was the order issued by the military to the 6 consortiums. They couldn't violate it. They didn't dare to create eye-catching news to make profits. The Golden Wall has always been impregnable. The barbarians have broken through the king's fortress and repeatedly hit the Golden Wall. We think that if we capture and interrogate the traitor of the Temple of Elements, then we might be able to get some information about the barbarians from his mouth. Dean's eyebrows rose as he saw the report in the lower left corner of the newspaper. He looked at the name in the lower left corner of the newspaper and smiled. Chapter 370. There was a vast territory in the north of the commercial district. The territory was surrounded by soldiers. It was the headquarters of the military region of the outer wall. There was a magnificent castle in the depths of the territory. There were 7 or 8 figures dressed in military uniforms in front of a sand table in a spacious hall. They were wearing medals on their shoulders. All of them were engraved with Goddess Sylvia's head. Some had 1 medal, while others had 5. The Golden Wall can't be held. More than 10 batches of soldiers have been replaced due to the continuous rainstorm. All of them are seriously ill, although the medical department has treated them in time, but they have just recovered from the illness. Their role in the war is less than that of a civilian farmer. A white-bearded old man wearing 5 golden medals said, "These damn barbarians are more cunning than we thought. The reinforcement notice from the inner wall has been passed down, but no one has come. I'm afraid that we can't count on them until the critical moment." "Oof," another middle-aged man said. "It's too late to establish a second line of defense. I've said before that we should fight in small groups outside the Red Maple Mountains. Once we enter the Golden Wall, it's our territory. We've trained our soldiers there, and we're familiar with the terrain. But you gave up this great opportunity and stayed in front of the Golden Wall. You thought that you wouldn't be afraid of the barbarians just because you have the heavenly cannon. The divine fire cannon is useless. It's useless in the face of a storm. All right, another blonde, middle-aged man frowned. What's the use of arguing about these things? The most important thing is to come up with a response as soon as possible. The situation is so disadvantageous. Auburn is a god, but he won't be able to play a big role. The barbarians took advantage of the rainstorm to attack. They must know about the existence of the cannons. Moreover, they are very familiar with the weaknesses of the cannons. There's a possibility that there is a traitor in the military. We must investigate this matter as soon as possible. Otherwise, our strategy will be sold to the barbarians. It's not only the military who knows about the existence and weaknesses of the cannons. Some people in the Temple of Elements and the Inferno family of the Dark Church also know about it. But they won't do such a stupid thing. After all, they are the biggest suspects. Another man said, "Listening to you, are you suspecting the architect called Dean?" The person next to him asked. Him? But this man was a civilian before. Later, he was selected by the Melon Consortium as a scavenger. He accidentally got magic marks and became a hunter. Later, he was imprisoned. After he was bailed out by the nobles, he joined the nobles and showed his talent as an architect. He has no background and no connections. How could he know about our artillery? The man said in a disdainful tone. The blond, middle-aged man frowned. It's hard to find out who the traitor is. The situation in the front line is urgent. We don't know when the barbarians will break through. We have to seize the time and establish the second line of defense. Didn't we send people to the inner wall? Why haven't we received any news yet? It's only half a day's journey from here to the inner wall. If they send people, then it would only take them a few hours to reach the battlefield. Even if they send the army, it would only take them half a day to arrive. We have notified them as soon as the war broke out. How come they haven't arrived yet? The white-bearded old man's face was gloomy. We don't need to count on the inner wall for the time being. They won't stand by, but they won't easily make a move. We should rely on ourselves to delay the battle. The river is more than 400 meters wide, and its depth is unfathomable. There are aquatic monsters in the river. Even if they have giant frogs, it will be useless. The only problem now is to repair the barrier as soon as possible. Once we retreat from the Golden Wall, the barbarians will take advantage of the situation to pursue us. If they don't attack the commercial district from the river, but invade the civilian district from the side, then the situation will be very bad. How about we divide a part of the army to guard the boundary wall of the civilian district? Another man suggested. It's difficult. Another middle-aged man sighed. The height of the boundary wall is not as high as the Golden Wall, and its width is also weak. It can only accommodate a limited number of soldiers. It can't stop the barbarians from attacking. The only way is to lead the civilians into the commercial district. No, the blond, middle-aged man flatly said. The situation is chaotic. It's very difficult to get through the people in the commercial district. We can't afford the responsibility if we introduce the civilians into the commercial district. The others looked at each other and sighed. Another day passed in the blink of an eye. It was the 4th day of the war. Dean was sitting in a spacious hall in the castle. There were several shelves with wooden swords, knight spears, and other weapons. It was a special exercise room for noble ladies and sons to avoid being tanned by the sun. At that moment, in the room, 2 small figures were wielding wooden swords and slashing at each other. The sounds of wooden swords clashing rang out. Dean was quietly sitting next to her, holding a book and tapping his legs. He looked up from time to time and took a sip of tea. He was very comfortable. Plop! Suddenly, one of the petite figures couldn't stand and fell to the ground. Sister! The taller figure hurriedly sheathed his sword and stepped forward to support her. It was Gabriel and her sister. Dean looked up. Let her get up by herself. Gabriel turned to look at Dean. His face was complex, but he continued to stretch out his hand to the girl. Come, sister, get up. The little girl turned her head and looked at Dudian. She shook her head and climbed up. She grinned at Gabriel. Brother, I'm fine. Let's continue. Gabriel was relieved. She suddenly thought of something. She turned to Dean and bowed 90 degrees. Master, I'm sorry, Dean's expression was very calm. There was no trace of anger. He slowly said, Since you want to protect her, please protect her for a lifetime. Otherwise, if you give up halfway, you will harm her. Do you understand? Gabriel's heart tightened, and he lowered his head even more. I understand. Dean nodded. Since you know, then from tomorrow on you will train with Nicholas. He won't be modest. Gabriel's face changed as he bit his lower lip. Yes. Young master. Artemis took 2 steps forward. Her pink little face was a little tearful. Dean glanced at her. If you didn't fall, your brother wouldn't have helped you. So, you don't have to beg me. You should beg yourself. Do your best. But, shut up and continue to practice. Dean said in a cold voice. Gabriel turned to help Artemis. Sister, let's continue. Don't worry. Yes, brother. Artemis choked with sobs. Knock. There was a knock on the door. Come in, Dean said. The door was pushed open. Crone was wearing a black suit, but one of the sleeves was empty. He respectfully said, Master, the letter you have been waiting for has arrived. Dean nodded and put down the book in his hand. He got up and looked at Gabriel and Artemis. Don't stop without my permission. Patience is the key to success. Do you understand? Yes, young master, Gabriel replied. Dean turned and left. Crone kept the etiquette of an aristocratic butler. He bowed his head respectfully and waited for Duddian to pass by him. He glanced at the book that Duddian had placed on the table. There were 4 words engraved on the cover: Peace and War. He retracted his gaze, followed Dean's footsteps, and left the room. He closed the door gently without making a sound. Chapter 371. Prepare the carriage. We're going to the Temple of Elements. Dean went straight down the stairs and went to the side hall to pick up the clothes he was going to wear. Yes. Crone quickly ran out of the living room. Crone and the carriage were waiting outside the door by the time Dean came out. The door was open for him. Dean nodded and got into the carriage. The coachman shook the rope, and the carriage slowly drove out of the castle. The rain fell on the roof of the carriage. It was like the fingers of a pianist playing on the keys. Dean quietly sat and listened. Half an hour passed, and the carriage arrived in front of the church mountain. He got off the carriage and went up the mountain with an umbrella. He looked at the guard. Is there a letter for me? You are. It's you. The guard was surprised as he saw Dean's face. Yes, there are too many letters. I'll go and get them for you. I don't need the letters from the past. I want the letters from today. Dean said. The guard was startled. Yes, today's letters are here. He pulled out a drawer and took out 4 or 5 letters from it and gave them to Dean. Dean put away the letters and thanked the guard. He went into the castle and went to his own building. He opened the letters one by one. In addition to the notification letters sent by the temple, the rest were from other architects. Most of them were asking him questions or trying to make friends with him. Has it been identified? I can't evaluate the level for the time being. Do you want me to go and discuss it? Strange. Are the masters of the temple unable to understand the blueprints? Or are they unable to understand the mechanical, kinetic energy? Dean raised his eyebrows as he read the contents of the letter. He put away the letter and left the building. He held the umbrella and went to the Congress Temple. Dean saw 7 or 8 carriages parked outside of the temple. The flags on the carriages were wrinkled and soaked by the rain. He couldn't see the patterns clearly, but he didn't need to think to know what kind of people were coming to the temple at this time. Dean's eyes lit up as he came to the front of the temple. The guards at the door were about to stop him, but they saw Dean's face under the umbrella. They took back their words and said in a respectful tone, Greetings, Architect Dean. Dean looked at both of them. Are the masters waiting inside? The 2 guards looked at each other and said, The masters are discussing something inside. They specifically told us to let you in when you arrive. Dean nodded and handed the umbrella to one of them. He shook off the rain splashing on his sleeves and strode into the temple. Architect Dean, this way please. The maid inside the temple immediately greeted Dean. Dean nodded slightly. Under the guidance of the maid, they came to the 2nd floor of the temple. The maid knocked on the door and waited for a sound to come from inside. She gently pushed the door open and asked Dean to enter. Dean stepped into the council hall. He saw 7 or 8 figures sitting on the table. All of them were old people. The younger ones were about 40 or 50 years old. Their hair was white. He turned to the thin old man and said, "Greetings, Master Skagen and all the masters present." The thin old man smiled. "Architect Dean is too polite. Oh, perhaps I should change the way I address you. I'll call you Master Dean." Even though Dean was mentally prepared, he couldn't help but be surprised. "Master Skagen, what do you mean?" "Huh?" Skagen laughed. "Of course it's the literal meaning. Your invention has been identified. All the masters in the temple, including the temple lord, have personally looked at it and agreed that you have the qualifications to be a master. If it wasn't for the fact that it's already late, the news of your new invention and your title as a master would have been announced. Currently, not many people know about this news, but tomorrow morning, I believe that the entire commercial district will know about this matter. All the nobles will hear about your name." Dean was startled. Although he expected that the new invention would be legendary unless the masters of the temple were old, but he didn't expect that the temple would be so efficient. It seemed that the temple wanted to help him as soon as the new invention came out. He smiled. "Thank you for the favor. I'll ask the masters to take care of me in the future." There was a trace of surprise in Skagen's eyes as he saw Dean calm down so quickly. But he was relieved. After all, Dean was a genius. Perhaps Dean's goal was to become a master. Skagen laughed. "You are too polite. The main reason we came to you is to discuss about your new invention. It's too incredible. After the votes of the masters and the proposal of the temple lord, we don't want to evaluate your new invention. It's neither a 5-star nor a legendary invention. We want to develop it as a faction. It will be the 10th faction of the temple." "Faction?" Dudian was surprised. He knew that the Temple of Elements didn't have a new faction in addition to the 9 basic elements that were born in the early years. The masters of the Temple of Elements believed that the 9 basic elements covered the mysteries of the world. However, the steam engine and the steam concept that he provided was listed as the 10th faction. Didn't he become the originator? Skagen smiled as he saw Dudian's stunned expression. "Master Dean, I really admire your new concept. I had a vague feeling of inspiration when I saw your new textile machine, but I couldn't grasp it until I saw your new invention steam. I didn't expect that you would be able to capture the inspiration in such a short period of time. Moreover, it's perfect and impeccable." "Ha!" Dean had a good impression of Skagen as he heard Skagen's hearty laughter. He smiled. "Master Dean, I admire your new concept. I felt some inspiration when I saw your new textile machine, but I couldn't grasp it. I didn't expect that you would be able to capture the inspiration in such a short period of time." "Master Dean is too polite." Another broad-faced old man next to him smiled and said, "All of us here have been drinking from the sweet wells of our predecessors. Only you have created a new well. Although it hasn't been developed yet, from the concept introduced in your blueprint, it does have great value. In the past, there was a master who created the cloud mist, and his method of making it was using steam. But for so many years we have been amazed at his invention. We didn't think that steam could be used in this way. It could be used as a kinetic energy. Isn't that so? Most of the time, you can think of something with just a thought, but if you don't think about it, you'll never know." Another skinny old man beside him agreed with the same sentiment. Skagen looked at Dean. "This time we were looking for you to give a name to your new faction. Think about it. You don't have to rush to answer." Dean thought for a moment and said, "Since everyone loves me so much, I won't be modest. Let's name the faction with a word. Let's call it Chief Faction. What do you think?" Gas. Skagen nodded. "Not bad. It's your right. You can name it however you want. We have no right to interfere. Of course, it can't be too ugly." Dean smiled. In addition to the concept of steam power, there are also 2 designs. The first one is called Steam Engine, and the second one is called Steam Gun. We have processed the finished products in the past few days. We have used them according to the design drawings. The effect is as magical as the design drawings. It is as great as the miracle of the God of Light. I have delayed 2 days to inform you. I hope you don't mind," Skagen said. Chapter 372. Dudian smiled. "You are too polite. I was in a hurry, so I only had time to produce the design drawings. I wanted to produce the finished product, but I heard the news from my servant that there were some unfavorable rumors about me. So I came out in a hurry and submitted the design. Fortunately, there were no big mistakes, or I would have to trouble you. Skagen looked at the people in the hall and sighed. We have heard about the rumors, but we believe that you won't do such a stupid thing. But the rumors are spreading like crazy. We have asked the magistrate to intervene in the investigation, but there is no direct evidence to prove that you didn't collude with the barbarians. So please be patient for the time being. Dudian nodded. I know that you have put in a lot of effort. The temple has been implicated because of me. I'm sorry, but I'm confused about this matter. I wanted to personally go to the magistrate and the military, but the witnesses are my servants. It's not convincing. It's like I can't prove my gender. Huh, the masters chuckled. Skagen smiled. I can understand your depression. The Lord has decided to let you go to the inner wall to study. You can avoid the situation and come back after the war is over. Go to the inner wall? Dudian was surprised, but relieved. After all, he had the identity of a master. It wasn't difficult for him to enter the inner wall. This was one of the reasons why the consortiums were in awe of the masters. After all, even the consortiums couldn't easily set foot in the inner wall. He thought for a moment and said in a sincere tone, Thank you for your kindness, but I don't think escaping is the solution to the problem. Moreover, we are at war, and the situation in front of us is urgent. The purpose of our invention is nothing more than to spread the faith and power of the God of Light for the benefit of the civilians. I really can't abandon the civilians and leave alone. It is contrary to my faith as an apprentice knight. So I would like to ask a favor from everyone. Apprentice knight? Skagen was surprised to hear Dudian's words, but he didn't have time to ask. What's the matter? Dudian looked at him and looked around at everyone. He bowed. I want to bring my new invention and personally go to the front line to face the barbarians. I swear to defend the Golden Wall. Dean will be eternally grateful if you can support me. These words, which contained piety and sincerity, were sonorous and powerful. All the masters present were moved. When they heard Dean's request, they guessed that he was asking them to use their connections to help Dean clear his grievances. They didn't expect that the boy would have a brave and fearless determination to personally set foot on the dangerous battlefield. Skagen took a deep breath. I admire your courage and believe in your benevolence. But you are an architect, after all. The situation in the front line is in a disadvantageous position. The barbarians will break the Golden Wall at any time. It is too dangerous for you to go now. If you fall, it will be the sorrow of the temple and the sorrow of the God of Light. It will be the sorrow of countless civilians. Yes, Mr. Dean, don't be so impulsive. We believe in you. Yes, Master Dean, the battlefield is too dangerous. Annaba, am willing to use all my connections to help you clear your name. There must be someone behind this. Dudian didn't raise his waist. His voice was full of determination and sincerity. Masters, I hope that you can agree to my request. I don't want the master medal or the rewards from the temple. I just hope that you can agree to my request. Let me advance and retreat together with you. I swear to defend against the barbarians. Everyone looked at each other. Some people who were previously dissatisfied with Dean couldn't help but change their expressions. Their eyes softened a lot. Skagen looked at everyone's eyes. He hesitated for a moment and helped Dean up. We will promise you, since you have made such a request. I will talk to the temple master about this matter. As for your new invention, the steam rifle is extremely lethal. It will play a big role in the battlefield. Perhaps it will be able to reverse the defeat. If the steam rifle is used as an invention, then it can be regarded as a legendary invention. Dean said, I hope that it's not too late to enter the battlefield. There are too many soldiers who die in every battle. Every soldier's death means that a family is torn apart. I hope that we can repel the barbarians and end the war. Skagen sighed. You are right. We don't want to see the pain caused by the war. Since you are willing, the temple will immediately contact the military for you and hand over the new invention to them. Mobilize the manufacturing industry of all consortiums. We can't let them break through the Golden Wall. If they do, there will be misery and suffering. Dudian nodded. The sooner the better. Skagen asked, Your steam rifle is a legendary item. How much are you going to sell it to the military? The price of legendary items was more than 1 million gold coins. Dudian shook his head. I won't sell it. The steam rifle will be donated to the military for free. I hope that they will use the money to buy the new invention to invest in the war and end the war as soon as possible. Skagen was startled. Many of the masters present could not help but be startled. Free donation? Or legendary item? In such a time of war, if Dudian took advantage of the situation and sold the steam rifle to the military at several times the price of an ordinary legendary item, then the military would have to buy it. But Dudian didn't do that. Instead, he selflessly donated it for free. That was at least 1 million gold coins worth of wealth. Millions of gold coins were enough to buy more than 10 bustling streets in the entire commercial district. Even the masters in the room wouldn't be able to make a legendary item in their lifetime. At most, they would be able to make a few 5-star items and become a master. However, the youth in front of them was willing to donate a legendary item for free. Moreover, he was donating it to the military who slandered him. Chapter 373. Donate. Skagen couldn't help but ask. Donate for free? Are you sure? Of course. Dudian replied in a serious tone. If I can save the lives of the frontline soldiers, even if I can only save one person, then why not? Skagen stared at his eyes, but only saw the firmness and sincerity. He couldn't help but sigh. You are right. The steam rifle is your invention. You have full control over how you deal with it. But you must let the civilians know that you have done such a thing. You must also let the military apologize to you. You have believed the enemy's lies and almost killed an outstanding master of invention. This crime is unforgivable. Dudian sighed. It doesn't matter if the civilians know or not. At least everyone here knows that I'm not such a person. If I'm lucky enough to survive the war, then I'll go to the inner wall to study. The disturbances here won't be able to disturb me. I just want to produce more inventions and change our living environment. I want to be a competent knight and use the power I learned from my hunter career in the right way. As for how the civilians think of me, I don't care. Anyway, I have a guard duty, so they won't dare to break into my castle. Everyone looked at each other as they heard the words. A broad-faced elder at the side shook his head and said, You can't say that. Even if you don't have much interaction with these commoners, being misunderstood by them like this will inevitably cause trouble in the future. If you're attacked by some evildoers, the gains won't make up for the losses. Besides, you've contributed so much this time. We don't need to publicize it, but we should at least let these commoners know what you've done for this war. Yes, the value of a legendary invention can't be calculated so easily. I think we should call the consortiums and the military and publish this matter in all the newspapers. That's right, Mr. Dean. When you were wronged, our temple was also questioned by some ignorant people. Some people even dared to talk nonsense about our temple. It's most likely that the Dark Church instigated it from behind. In any case, this evil atmosphere must be rectified. Everyone agreed. Skagen nodded and looked at Dudian. Everyone is right. Don't think too much about this matter. We will help you solve it. Moreover, this matter is not only about your reputation, but also the reputation of the entire temple. We must not give the Dark Church the opportunity to spread rumors. Dean was startled. I'm sorry. I think it's too simple. In that case, I'll listen to the arrangement of the temple. But I hope that the new invention will be handed over to the military as soon as possible. The sooner it is handed over to them, the sooner it can be used in the battlefield. Dean's expression was full of seriousness. Skagen nodded. I know. I'll go and discuss with the temple, and then send someone to hand it over to the military. Thank you, Dudian said. What are you talking about? We should thank you. You said that you are an apprentice knight. When did that happen? Skagen asked. Dudian replied, It happened recently. I went to the Knight's Hall because I saw the casualty data in the military newspaper. I hoped to have the opportunity to join the battlefield. Fortunately, I passed the initial test. But later I learned that the military will force the hunters of the consortia to join the battlefield. If I had known about it, then I wouldn't have gone to the test. I would have directly entered the battlefield as a hunter. Skagen said, Nonsense. You are a dignified architect now. How can you enter the battlefield as a lowly hunter? They are forced to be cannon fodder by the military. Who knows how many of them will survive? Besides, the military doesn't have the guts to force you into the battlefield unless they want to cut off the supply of the temple. That's not necessarily true. Another man sneered. The military is getting more and more daring to publish this matter in the newspaper based on the words of the barbarians. The military is getting more and more courageous. Yes, it's time to teach the military a lesson. Another old man said in a cold tone. Dudian said, Everyone, we are at the stage of war. It's understandable that the military is so sensitive. We still have the barbarians as our enemies. Wouldn't it be a joke to the barbarians if there is internal friction? The first few people were startled. They couldn't help but look at Dean with some sighs in their eyes. Skagen patted Dudian's shoulder. It would be great if everyone thinks like you. We won't do anything to the military during the war. But after the war is over, we have to teach them a lesson. It's not called internal friction, but balance. If the military gets more and more rampant, then the losses will be greater in the end. Moreover, they're so careless in suspecting a master. Although you weren't a master, but there is no doubt about your potential. It's no different than killing a master. If we don't teach them a lesson, then wouldn't they think that the Temple of Elements is a soft persimmon? Dudian scratched his head as he didn't know what to say. Skagen smiled as he saw this. Let's call it a day. Since you don't want to go to the inner wall, then do as you please. But you must be escorted by the military when you go to the battlefield. Otherwise, we will never allow you to go. Dudian replied, Well, thank you for your kindness. Dudian will remember it. Don't worry about it. We will be friends in the future. Skagen smiled. Shortly after the Gods' Parliament ended, in the military headquarters in the north of the commercial district, whoosh, a bird with white feathers flew over. Its wings weren't stained by the rain. It was obvious that the rain couldn't hinder its flight. A middle-aged officer in a military uniform reached out and caught it. He removed the letter tube from its leg and took out the letter that was rolled up into a small ball. He opened it and glanced at it. Suddenly, he was stunned. Legendary divine spell, free donation. He was startled for a moment. He hurriedly turned around and ran to a hall. There was a huge sand table in the middle of the hall. It covered the entire terrain of the outer wall. It extended to the radiation zone outside the fortress. However, the terrain outline of the radiation zone wasn't so clear. Most of it was replaced by gray carbon particles. It meant that it was an unknown area that hadn't been explored yet. There were several figures wearing star medals in front of the sand table. They were talking about something. The middle-aged officer hurriedly ran over and said, Reporting to the general. When one of the golden-haired middle-aged generals heard this, he turned around and glanced at this person. He frowned and said, A dignified colonel can't even speak properly? The middle-aged officer's heart trembled. Reporting to the general. I just got the news from the temple. They have created a new invention. It's legendary level. They are going to donate it to the military for free. The hall was silent. The other generals couldn't help but turn around. Although they weren't in the mood to listen to the middle-aged colonel, the words temple and legendary were so unique that their attention was immediately drawn to them. What did you say? The blond middle-aged man's eyes widened. The middle-aged officer replied, I just got the news that a master from the temple called Dean has created a legendary invention called Steam Rifle. It will be donated to the military for free. It's a military war invention. Hearing this, the generals around the sand table looked at each other in dismay. Military invention and legendary level. The shock on a middle-aged general's face slowly subsided, and he said in surprise, How many years has it been since the last military use of legendary magic in a shrine? Could it be that they deliberately raised the level? Chapter 374. Master, Dean. At this moment, the other generals also came to their senses and were instantly stunned. The colonel bowed his head. There's no mistake. The name written on it is Master Dean. The new invention steam gun was donated to us by him. The generals were stunned. The blond middle-aged man took a deep breath. Dean is the traitor of the temple that we have captured from the barbarians? How is it possible? We have investigated that person's information. Isn't he 16 or 17 years old? He has just become a senior architect. How could he be promoted to master in such a short period of time? If this legendary military divine art called steam gun was really created by him, then it's reasonable for the shrine to promote him to be a master. But another man slowly calmed down and said thoughtfully. The white-bearded old man sighed. Although the temple has always protected its own image, but the internal laws are strict. If Dean's invention is forced to be a legendary item, then I'm afraid the other masters won't be convinced. It will be a huge loss. I'm afraid that the steam gun is really a legendary weapon. It would be great if it could help the situation in the front line. The doubts in the bottom of their hearts dissipated as they heard the old man's words. One of them said, if it really is a legendary item, then the little guy named Dean doesn't seem like a traitor since he donated it to us for free. After all, the price of a legendary item is millions of gold coins. 10 lifetimes of luxury wouldn't be enough to spend it all. Even if he carries a stigma, he could be sent to the inner wall to live and never return to the outer wall. Yes, he is too stupid if he is going to use a free donation to wash away the suspicion. It seems that we have to investigate this person. Although the architects of the temple aren't as noble as people think, but there are many masters who are worthy of admiration. If this person is wronged, then we will be in trouble. That's right. We've offended the temple quite a lot this time. It's all because of those damn bastards. They didn't even clarify the situation before publishing the news. If it turns out to be a misunderstanding now, our military will lose all face. Everyone looked at each other and felt that this matter was rather thorny. Just then, report. A guard came to the side of the colonel. He saluted the generals and said, Generals, Master Skagen of the temple has come to see General Lorenzo. Master Skagen? He actually came in person? Are you here to denounce me? The generals looked at each other. The white-bearded old man's face was gloomy as he said to the guard, Quickly invite him over. Yes, the guard answered and ran off. After a while, Skagen came to the hall under the guidance of the guards. The white-bearded old man was already waiting in front of the sand table. He slowly stepped forward as he saw Skagen's figure. It seemed that he deliberately slowed down the angle of the sand table. There was a big smile on his face. Master, I haven't seen you for a long time. How come you have the time to come here today? Skagen calmly glanced at the generals behind him. I won't delay too much of your time. I have sent a letter to the military, and I believe that your people have already passed it to you. I have come here in person on behalf of the temple, and also on behalf of the new master of the temple. Mr. Dean, I have come to tell you two things. Lorenzo's face slightly changed, but he still maintained a smile on his face. Master is really as swift as the rumors say. We just learned that Dean has been appointed as a master. We haven't had the time to congratulate him. I don't know what you want to talk about. Skagen calmly said, First, we want to publish the news in the newspaper. We want to announce that Master Dean has donated the new invention for free. We need justice. Master Dean has generously donated the legendary item for free. Even if Master Dean didn't say it, we would have announced it in the newspaper. Lorenzo frowned. It's just that the battlefield ahead is unpredictable. Although it's only a small headline position, isn't it a bit disrespectful to do so? Skagen's mouth curved into a cold arc. Is it possible that the legendary item we donated to you for free has nothing to do with the war? Although you haven't seen the legendary invention, but the Temple of Elements has provided military inventions from 1 star to 5 stars. Have we ever disappointed the military? Lorenzo's complexion changed. If he didn't agree, it would be the same as publicly slapping the temple's face. If he agreed, then he would have to lick back the spit he had spat on Lin Ming's body. Master, I think we have to discuss this matter, Skagen frowned. General just said that the situation of the war is changing rapidly. Shouldn't we put all our energy into the war strategy? Lorenzo's face sank. All right, I can agree to this. What about the second thing? Skagen continued. The second thing is very simple. Master Dean insists on going to the front line. I hope you can send the most elite soldiers to protect him. The temple doesn't want to see a master fall in this place. I believe that you also don't want to see a genius who is less than 18 years old, who has produced 2 legendary inventions, die. It would be a loss for the entire giant wall. Lorenzo was startled. The generals who were standing behind him were also startled. They were angry when they saw Skagen's domineering appearance. But at this moment, they doubted their ears. What was the front line? Even the generals weren't willing to go there, especially in the current precarious situation. If the Golden Wall was captured by the barbarians, then the generals would find it difficult to escape death. The strength of an individual was as small as a grain of sand in the middle of thousands of soldiers. But this young man who had just received the title actually took the initiative to go to the front line? Why did he insist? Lorenzo came back to his senses. Master Skagen, are you right? Master Dean wants to go to the front line? Why don't you stop him? The front line is too dangerous. Even if we send the most elite soldiers, we wouldn't be able to ensure the safety of a person. It's too dangerous. And to tell you the truth, we can't guarantee that the barbarians won't be able to break through the Golden Wall in the next moment. Once the Golden Wall falls, we can only rely on the blessing of the goddess of luck to return alive. Skagen's face sank. We will stop him if we can, but he still wants to go. Moreover, you don't know that Dean is not only a rare genius, but he also passed the Knight's Hall test. Once he passes the test, he will become a real knight. He has the spirit of a knight. We wanted to send him to the inner wall so that he wouldn't return to the outer wall. Skagen's fingers slightly clenched in his sleeves. His emotions fluctuated as he said, but he didn't want to escape. In order to reduce the casualties of your soldiers, so that your money can be used on the battlefield, and to win this war, he gave up the fortune of selling this legendary divine art and offered to donate it to your army for free. For the sake of his knight's glory, he insisted on going to the battlefield himself. He used to be a hunter, but not long after, he was imprisoned. Now that he saw that the front line was in danger and that there were heavy casualties, he decided to go to the battlefield himself in order to do his part. Perhaps you would think that he wanted to save his reputation and prove that he didn't collude with the barbarians. But, generals, he is already a master of magic. Moreover, he is a master who has produced 2 legendary inventions. He could have taken advantage of the situation and sold the legendary invention to the military at a sky-high price. He could have made endless wealth. But he didn't do that. He could have entered the inner wall with huge wealth and enjoy a superior life and glory. But he gave up. He abandoned his glory and rushed to the battlefield. He rushed to the battlefield where he could die anytime. Chapter 375. Lorenzo and the other generals fell into silence as they looked at Skagen's angry expression. The vast hall was silent for an instant. After a moment of silence, Lorenzo slowly opened his mouth. Grandmaster, we will send our best soldiers to protect Grandmaster Dean. You don't have to worry about this. In addition, we will thoroughly investigate the confession of the barbarians. We will make sure that Master Dean is innocent. This matter is due to the negligence of the military. We didn't have enough evidence to support Dean. We are willing to take full responsibility for this. I hope that this matter won't affect the friendship and alliance between us and the temple. Skagen's anger subsided as he saw the serious expression on Lorenzo's face. I hope there won't be a next time. Lorenzo nodded. There won't be a next time. Please forgive me. Skagen knew that such a verbal promise was useless. But the key was the attitude of the other party. The anger on his face disappeared, and his expression became cold. He raised his hand, and 2 middle-aged men, wearing white robes, came in from behind the door of the hall. Judging from the medals on their shoulders, they were senior architects. One of them was holding a metal object with a strange shape. Lorenzo and the generals looked at the two as soon as they appeared. Their eyes were immediately attracted by the metal object. They assumed that this object was the legendary military item, sent by the temple. However, it didn't seem to have any lethality and didn't have the slightest sharp edge. They couldn't help but be curious about it. This is the legendary item made by Master Dean. Steam gun. Skagen indifferently said, "Generals, is it convenient for me to show its power?" Lorenzo was very curious. "Of course, this place is spacious. Master can demonstrate as you please." Skagen nodded and glanced at the hall. He found that there were no decorations. His eyes fell on the chairs. "Use this chair. General, please take off your armor and put the chair on the seat." Lorenzo and the generals were puzzled, but they still followed Skagen's method. Skagen nodded towards the architect as he saw that the target was ready. The latter respectfully nodded in response. Then he picked up the steam rifle and stood 15 meters away from the chair. "Generals, please step aside. Don't block the middle." Lorenzo and the other generals were astonished when they saw the way he was driving. Why'd it look like a bow and arrow? After they left, the middle-aged architect aimed the steam rifle at the chair. He took out a match and lit the fuse on the side of the steam capsule. Then he skillfully adjusted the second valve, pulled the lock wire, and pulled the trigger. White steam shot out from the valve behind the rifle. At the same time, a metal bead was propelled by the white steam from the muzzle and suddenly shot out. Whoosh! The sound of metal colliding echoed. The sound of metal colliding was heard, but disappeared in the blink of an eye. Lorenzo and the other generals who were standing on both sides of the chair suddenly narrowed their eyes. Their faces were filled with shock. They felt the hairs on their bodies standing erect. They were trembling with fear. They were able to become generals not only because of their strategies and military knowledge, but also because of their extremely high combat strength. They were able to guarantee that they would come back alive again and again in countless battles. But at this moment, they felt as if the god of death had passed by them. It was too real, too terrifying. Their physique was higher than that of ordinary people. Although they were standing on both sides of the chair, but they felt their hearts tremble the moment the white steam came out of the strange weapon. Lorenzo looked back in a daze and saw a hole in the waist of the armor on the chair. Although this was the weakest part of the armor, but it was the armor used by the generals. Even a sword couldn't pierce through it. There was a trace of pride in Skagen's eyes as he saw the shocked expression of the generals. He was also shocked when he first saw the power of this legendary weapon. However, lethality was the secondary advantage of this weapon. The most terrible thing was that even a child with no fighting power could exert the full destructive power of this weapon. The horror of such a thing was not inferior to the flame explosion technique that was born in the Dark Church many years ago. In some ways, it was even more terrifying. After all, the flame explosion technique needed a lot of energy to burst out enough power. It was inconvenient to carry. But this steam gun was different. It was light and compact. If it was used by the cult, then the destructive power would be 10 times more than the flame explosion technique. An elderly general swallowed his saliva, unable to come to his senses. The senior architect had pulled the valve and extinguished the flame. He stood quietly in the same place. Lorenzo and the other generals looked at him with fear and trepidation in their eyes. Lorenzo's face remained calm, but his chest slightly heaved up and down. He slowly opened his mouth, but his voice had a trace of hoarseness. "This thing, is it used like this?" Skagen faintly smiled. "Yes, the requirements of the steam rifle aren't high, as long as the user has the ability to aim at the enemy. Moreover, the range of the steam rifle isn't far. The maximum is 50 meters. This is the third gear. The second gear has a range of 30 meters, and the first gear has a range of 15 meters. The speed of accumulating steam and the interval between shots will be different depending on the gear. This is recorded in the information of the divine technique. I won't go into details." Lorenzo looked at the spear-wielding divine envoy and said, This thing shouldn't be used here." Skagen replied, "It's just a drill. The fire has been turned off. You don't need to worry." Lorenzo and the generals heaved a sigh of relief after hearing this. However, they were still a little afraid. After all, The range of this god's shooting was too small, and the speed of the attack was too fast. Even if they were prepared, it would still be difficult to avoid it. If they were to relax for a moment, then they would be killed on the spot. It was too terrifying. A general turned around and lifted the armored chair. He saw a bead embedded in the back of the chair. He was frightened. He carefully reached out his hand and pulled it out. He looked at Skagen. "Master, is this the little thing that caused the attack?" "Yes." Skagen nodded. Lorenzo and the other generals looked over, and their complexions changed. They sucked in a breath of cold air. They hadn't thought that such a small iron marble could cause such a terrifying lethality. "This is really an artifact." Lorenzo looked at the steam rifle in the hands of the architect. There was fear in his eyes as he said with a wry smile. Skagen indifferently said, "Every legendary level military invention is equivalent to an artifact. The products of the temple never disappoint you. This thing can penetrate steel. It's terrible." The golden-haired middle-aged general said with lingering fear, "If it is used on a large scale on the battlefield, the style of warfare in the future will be rewritten. Other long-range military magic will also be replaced by this thing. No wonder it is rated as a legendary magic. It really has the power to create a new era." Skagen said indifferently, "The steel is too soft, and the thickness of your armor isn't enough. It is normal for it to be pierced. You have seen the steam rifle. I hope you can make it as soon as possible and put it into the battlefield to reduce casualties. This is also Master Dean's wish." Skagen said indifferently, "Master Dean, you have seen the steam rifle. I hope you can make it as soon as possible and put it into the battlefield." Lorenzo solemnly said, "Our military will defend the Golden Wall. We will not disappoint Master Dean's expectations." Skagen looked at him, and his expression softened. He nodded and turned away. The oracle who was holding the rifle came forward and presented it to Lorenzo. Lorenzo and the other generals had the urge to stop him when they saw him holding his spear. Lorenzo's heart was beating like a drum, but he didn't see any hostility or murderous aura coming from the latter. He stabilized his body and tensed his muscles. He was ready to respond at any time. "General, I give you the rifle." The architect handed it over to Skagen. Lorenzo squeezed an unnatural smile on his face as he took the gun from Dudian's hands. "This is the introduction of the steam rifle. General can rest assured that it is very safe as long as it is used properly." The architect said with a smile, "Thank you." Lorenzo politely replied. Lorenzo's heart was at ease after Skagen and the two senior architects left. He turned around and said, "Immediately pass down the order to all the military workshops to start manufacturing the steam rifle. Don't rest." "Yes." A general immediately ran out to give the order. "General, I think that the whole body of the rifle is made of metal. I'm afraid that we can't make much of it in the military warehouse. We have to collect it from the consortiums." Another middle-aged general said. He was the head of the military logistics department. St. Lawrence said coldly, "The treaty we signed with the consortiums clearly states that during times of war, they must support us with all their might. If anyone wants to make dirty money at this time, we will forcibly seize all of their factories." "Yes, now that we have the steam rifle, we will be able to turn the tide," the blond middle-aged general said in excitement. The architect was weak, but he could use it. If the archers can use it, then they will be able to enter the battlefield. "Yes, I don't know when a military workshop will be able to make it. This thing is made up of many parts. It will take a lot of time to carve the mold." Chapter 376. After leaving the temple, Dean went straight back to the castle. He called old Feline and others and briefly told them about today's events. When they heard that he was conferred the title of Master, they were shocked and speechless. The new invention that you submitted last time was really a legendary invention." Old Feline's face was full of shock as he felt incredible. After all, the boy sitting in front of him was only a 16-year-old boy. He was able to produce a legendary item, but now he was able to produce a second one. This was simply unprecedented in both the ancient and modern times. Zindral, Nicholas, Crone, and others were also shocked. The news was too shocking. A 16-year-old master who had produced 2 legendary inventions. Such a name was one of the best in the entire temple. Compared to his previous identity as a senior architect, the difference was like the clouds and mud. He had become one of the top figures in the outer wall. Dean sighed in his heart as he saw the shocked expressions of the others. It seemed that the title of master was far more profound in their minds than the creation of a new invention system. It was probably because of the prestige accumulated by the masters of the temple over a long period of time. Even old nobles like Old Feline were no exception. For the divine emissaries of the shrine, the news of creating a new system of magic was far more sensational than the fact that he had become a master. After all, ever since the birth of the shrine, the 9 great systems of magic had been created in just a dozen years. However, in the long years that followed, no new system of magic had been created. It could be said that once his system of air magic was developed, he would be a living legend. With such an identity, he would be an existence that could call the wind and summon the rain in the outer wall. I didn't ask you to come here to express your feelings. Dudian's voice pulled everyone's thoughts back. I'm going to personally participate in the war with my new invention. I'm going to use action to reverse the negative impact caused by the Melon Consortium. So now I need you to do some preparation work. Old Feline and others were startled as they stared at Dean in astonishment. You want to participate in the war? Old Feline was stunned. Sandro said, Young master, you have just been conferred the title of master, and you are also a top master who has created 2 legendary magic arts. With your current status, the people will no longer doubt you. How can you personally go to the battlefield? It's too dangerous. What if something happens? Yeah. Nicotine also chimed in. Huh? Dudian glanced at him. Nicotine immediately stopped talking and showed a bitter face. Dean indifferently said, I have made up my mind. I didn't ask you to persuade me. My identity alone can remove the suspicion of most of the people. Moreover, the military will find a scapegoat to help me restore the previous damage to my reputation. But how is that enough? What I want is not to get rid of the people's anger, but to divert it. Whoever splashed dirty water on me, I will make him swallow it himself. Old Feline frowned. Transfer? What does it have to do with your participation in the war? If you want to divert the anger, then we will have to find evidence to prove that the Melon Consortium is slandering you. Dean said, We don't have enough manpower, so we can't find evidence to pull them into the water. But once the war is over, even if we find the evidence, the emotions of the civilians will fade. Eventually, the pain will be healed by time. We don't want to offend such a big consortium. So we can only take advantage of the chaotic atmosphere of the war to ignite the anger in their bodies. War? How? Old Feline frowned as he didn't understand. Dean shook his head. It's a long story. In short, listen to my instructions. Nicotine, tell the Black Workshop to speed up the printing of leaflets. Post them in the commercial district and civilian areas. Hire more people and write down the news that I will personally go to war. Remember to render my image bright and tragic. Also write down the news that I have donated legendary items to the military. Also write down the news that I have become a master of the temple. You should know the specifics. I know, master. Nicotine bowed his head. His voice was full of awe. Dudian looked at Crone. Prepare some people to go to the battlefield. After the end of the first battle, spread the news that Melon Consortium is framing me. Write down the names of the people and the time and place. Write down the names of high-ranking officers and priests of the Holy Church. Don't write down their real names. Make up a fictional character, such as Master Crone or Priest Crone. Do you understand? Crone was startled. Old Feline and Nicotine were also stunned. I know. Crone reacted and nodded. Dean said, We have to do this secretly. Remember to hire a person so that I won't trace it back to us. Use the method I usually teach you. I know, master. Crone bowed his head. Dean nodded and looked at Old Feline. Patriarch, help me contact all the consortia except the Melon Consortium. Let them help me publish this matter in the newspapers. Hint to them that I will remember this favor if they perform well. But don't use my name to talk about these things. I know. Old Feline nodded as he heard Dean's orderly arrangement. He knew that he was worrying too much. He was a little relieved. Dean looked at Sander. I'll trouble you to personally go to the Melon Consortium and use my name to talk to them. If they're willing to withdraw their slanderous remarks and clarify for me, then I will let bygones be bygones. Everyone will coexist peacefully in the future, but they must compensate me for the loss of reputation. 1 million gold coins. In addition, they must give us a passage outside the giant wall. Remember to emphasize one point. As long as they are willing to agree, then I swear in my name that I will never target them again. Everyone will coexist peacefully. Sander was startled. Old Feline, Nicotine, and Crone were also startled. Let bygones be bygones. Peaceful coexistence? They had been in contact with Dean for a long time. They knew that the latter wasn't such a kind person. Do you remember? Dean frowned. Sandro recovered. I will remember. But will the Melon Consortium believe that we have been enemies with them for a long time? Moreover, are you really not going to take revenge? Dean replied. How can we attack if we don't let the enemy relax? They understood Dean's intention. They couldn't help but change their faces. There was a burst of chill in their hearts. At the same time, they were glad that such a person was on their side and not an enemy. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to sleep at night. When are you going to set off? Old Feline asked Dean. Dean gently rubbed his fingers. It's still too early. I will set off when the Golden Wall is captured by the barbarians. Old Feline was surprised. Wait until the Golden Wall is broken? Wouldn't the barbarians rush into the commercial district? I'm afraid. We will win the battle against the Melon Consortium as long as I set off. If I can repel the barbarians, then it will be a great victory for the Melon Consortium. There will be no chance for the Melon Consortium to make a comeback. But if the Golden Wall doesn't fall, then I will only get some cheers even if I repel the barbarians. What's the point of doing such a strenuous thing? Dean said in a flat tone. Chapter 377. Dudian looked at him. Patriarch, you seem to think too highly of me. Old Feline was startled. I'm going to the battlefield to show a stance. Dean continued. In the minds of the civilians and the nobles of the consortiums, I'm just a gifted architect. Although architects are good at creating powerful items, but they are weak. Even those who know that I have the strength of an intermediate hunter don't think that I can play any role in a war. My personal strength is like a drop of water. It can't set up any waves. So I'll go to the battlefield earlier or later. As long as I'm there before the end of the war, then I'll win. Old Feline slightly opened his mouth, but couldn't speak. Dudian continued. I didn't say from the beginning that I'm going to the battlefield to be a hero. Of course, if a frail architect can do that, then the effect will be better. However, now is not the time. If he did not let these commoners experience enough pain, let them grit their teeth and break their hearts, how would he be able to incite their anger? If we don't make them lose their minds, then how will they dare to overthrow a plutocrat that has industries all over the outer wall? If only a small number of people experience the pain of war, then they will be abandoned by their families. They will be pushed to the edge of society. Even if they want to resist, they won't be able to. So let's let them suffer a bit more. Once anger and despair drive them crazy, then we will blow the horn of counterattack. There was silence in the study room. Old Feline, Zendral, Nicholas, Crone, and others looked at the teenagers in different expression. They listened to the calm words that came out of his mouth. They felt a chill in their hearts and spread to the limbs of their body. Old Feline's eyelids slightly twitched as he looked at Dean. Once the Golden Wall is occupied by the barbarians, will the army be able to repel the barbarians by relying on your legendary items? If not, then I'm afraid. Of course. Dudian's tone was full of confidence. Although it will be difficult to kill the monsters outside the giant wall, but it will be easy to penetrate the barbarians' armor and hide helmets. In this world, although there was the invasion of the monsters outside the giant wall, which made the evolution of cold weapons more advanced. The smelting process was extremely developed, but the purification of steel was hindered by the lack of other aspects of technology. Therefore, the armor couldn't effectively resist the bullets of the steam rifle. Otherwise, when the first guns came out in the old era, the medieval European knight class wouldn't be defeated. Also, some strong and well-equipped cold weapons countries wouldn't be defeated in front of those countries who had the gun technology. They were unable to resist. Moreover, Dudian steam rifle mainly used steam instead of gunpowder as the driving energy. Other aspects of the rifle were based on the principle of the first gun that appeared in the old era. The rifle was invented in the old era during the Song dynasty of China. To be precise, it was in the middle of the Southern Song dynasty. Although gunpowder had been used in the military as early as the end of the Tang dynasty. But at that time, only rockets, gunpowder tied to arrows, flying fire, and other gunpowder weapons were produced. The rifle was the first real gun. Its power was peerless. The furthest range was up to 300 meters, and the effective range was about 100 meters. It could easily penetrate the armors of the Jin soldiers who were fighting against the Southern Song dynasty. However, because of the alternation of kinetic energy, the steam device installed on the gun couldn't produce the same kinetic energy as the gunpowder. As a result, the range and destructive power of the steam rifle couldn't be compared with the rifle. However, this was enough for Dudian. In this chaotic giant wall, he didn't want the real meaning of the gun to appear. Although he knew that the steam rifle was likely to open a gap, but at least in the short term, no one would be able to make a gun that could threaten him. After all, he was in a high position and had too many enemies. If someone sent a few people to hide in the dark, then he wouldn't be able to be vigilant and ready to dodge. However, if he could reach the level of the Dragon Clan's young lady, even firearms would not be a threat to him. Although the steam rifle couldn't be compared with a musket, but it could still penetrate the armors of the soldiers within the effective range of 50 meters. Even some hunters' armors or generals' armors had weak points due to the stitching of the materials, so the steam rifle could penetrate the armor. Moreover, the steam rifle had a range of 50 meters. If someone wanted to use it to plot against him, he believed that he would be able to see the killing intent of the other person, even if the other person could disguise it well. But don't forget that he could see the heart and blood vessels of the other person. Through the abnormal contraction of the heart or the blood vessels, he could roughly judge the hidden emotions of the other person. Moreover, he could also smell the smell of iron products and the sound emitted. Speaking of this, Dudian was glad that the abnormal development of the world had occurred. The Inferno family of the Dark Church had made gunpowder. Later on, they had made artillery and used gunpowder in the military. The time difference was several times faster than the time in the old era of China. After all, in the early days of China, gunpowder was only used for alchemy. It wasn't until the end of the Tang dynasty that it was used in the military. From the Tang dynasty to the Southern Song dynasty, it took more than 350 years for the gunpowder to be used in the military. Compared to the appearance of gunpowder in the giant wall, it was too long. However, it wasn't surprising. Dudian looked at the history of the Southern Song dynasty. The reason for the emergence of the rifle was due to the frequent wars in the Southern Song dynasty. Wars were the most effective way to catalyze the development of new weapons. From this, it could be concluded that the advancement of the weapons was inseparable from the comfort of the environment at that time. This was also why, after gunpowder entered the West, it quickly destroyed the repressive slave system of the West in the Middle Ages. The accumulated rebellions led to continuous wars, causing gunpowder to be highly valued by the Western countries. As the country that invented gunpowder, it declined in peace. It turned the country's most precious weapon into firecrackers to suppress the gods and pray to Buddha, just like the current situation inside the giant wall. Although the barbarians had repeatedly harassed the border, but it was only a small skirmish. There were very few big movements inside the giant wall. Naturally, the people inside the Golden Wall were tired of pursuing powerful weapons of war. There were only 2 or 3 times when the barbarians broke through the fortress and approached the Golden Wall. But in these 2 or 3 times, the barbarians came up with super weapons such as the god's artillery. However, after the invention of the god cannon, gunpowder did not continue to be invented and manufactured. The main reason for the appearance of guided missiles, assault rifles, and fire and thunder weapons was that the military, or rather, those in power, regarded gunpowder as a taboo. The artillery had become a taboo weapon. It wasn't used in ordinary small-scale wars. It wasn't even installed in the frontline fortresses. It showed how much the military feared it. As an architect, who would dare to study the taboo? It was like the scientists of the old era didn't dare to do experiments that violated the laws of the country. But the old era was different. Even if they violated the laws and regulations, they could escape to other countries. But in the giant wall, they couldn't escape even if they wanted to. The people of the Dark Church also didn't dare to study gunpowder because gunpowder was also a taboo in the Dark Church. Old Feline was relieved as he looked at Dean's confident appearance. But there was a bitter taste in his heart. Although he didn't care about the civilians, but the thought of so many civilians being slaughtered by the barbarians made his heart feel uncomfortable and guilty. However, he knew that it was useless to say anything. From a rational point of view, he also thought that Dean was right. However, such extreme rationality was too cold-blooded. "I'll contact the consortia." Old Feline sighed and got up. Duddy nodded. "You've worked hard." "No, you've suffered more." Old Feline raised his thick palm and wanted to pat Dujian's shoulder. But he stopped halfway. He turned around and left the room. Chapter 378. Mel Family. The old patriarch of the Mel family was sitting in a luxurious room. Mel George was sitting in a chair with a gloomy expression. There were two figures standing in front of him. They were Mark and Sarah Mel, who was recognized as the most outstanding businesswoman in the noble circle. Both of them had an ugly expression on their faces. Wait until tomorrow morning. All the nobles, knights, and civilians will know that this bastard will become the youngest master in the temple. The wrinkles on George's weather-beaten face were like swords. His gentle eyes were now incomparably sharp. He coldly looked at the slender figure of Sarah Mel. Once upon a time, she was his proudest granddaughter. But now, he was filled with disappointment and anger. Temporarily block the news of Master Mostar. Don't let the directors of the consortium know. George stared at Sarah and said, "You have full authority over this matter. This was supposed to be your first glorious achievement after you entered the consortium. But you have the resources and contacts of the entire consortium. You actually screwed up this matter. You can't even deal with a person who has no background and identity as a pariah." Sarah stared at George. Sarah Mel bit her lower lip as she heard his suppressed anger. "Grandpa, I didn't expect that he would be so capable." In a short period of time after producing the lightning rod, he produced another legendary item. This is something that no one can predict. George slammed his palm on the table and said angrily, "You also what? Don't you know how to kill him before he resists? What did I teach you? When facing an enemy, you can't be soft-hearted and you can't play tricks on them. Even an injured, skinny dog will turn around and pounce on you if it's cornered. Even if it can't hurt you, it will still dirty you. You can't even remember such a simple truth." Moreover, he was outside the giant wall for 7 or 8 days. He was cut off from all contact with the giant wall. You attacked him from the back, but you still couldn't put him to death. If you had tarnished his reputation and made him a wanted criminal by the military before he came back, he wouldn't have dared to show his face if you had produced concrete evidence to prove his crimes. How would he submit the invention? Sarah was startled. She bit her lips and said, "Grandpa, I know I was wrong. I will take responsibility for this matter." "Responsible?" George didn't laugh as if he had heard the biggest joke. He said in a cold tone, "What can you use to be responsible for him? Even if he is an ordinary master, he is not someone you could be responsible for. Not to mention he is the youngest master. He has infinite possibilities, and he has also created a new system of magic. If the new system of magic can stand the test of time, do you know what kind of person he will become? If he wants to destroy the Melon Consortium, it will be as simple as killing a mosquito. All the nobles and civilians will target us and cut off all trade. Do you understand? Sarah's face paled. She realized that things were more complicated than she had imagined. Her heart was full of remorse and remorse. She was looking forward to seeing the youth's desperate and helpless appearance. But now it seemed like her expectation was ironic and a joke. Father, Mark said, it's useless to blame Sarah. The little devil has just become a master, so his status is not stable. He doesn't have the time to establish contacts. We can only go down the dark road. Isn't he going to front line? We can send people to kill him in the chaos of the war. As long as he dies, he will lose all glory and halo. George looked at him and snorted. That's the only thing we can do now. But we can only succeed. Failure is not allowed. Otherwise, the losses of our Melon Consortium will be immeasurable. Don't forget that there are 5 tigers staring at us. I will. I will contact the military and let the shadow sneak into his guards and kill him when he is unprepared. He is just an intermediate hunter, although he has a rare magic mark, but his combat power is average. Moreover, he is a hunter. With the ability of the shadow, killing him will be as easy as cutting vegetables. Mark said. George nodded slightly and glanced at Sarah. During this time, you go back and reflect on your mistakes. Stop all the work in your hands and wait until you reflect on your mistakes. Sarah Mel clenched her fists and gritted her teeth. I know, Grandpa. I'm sorry. Go, George said in a cold voice. Sarah Mel felt pain in her heart as she turned and left the room. George turned his head and looked at Mark after she left. I heard that old Fouline has come to negotiate. Well, he wants us to compensate him with 1 million gold coins. He also wants to cede a passage to the giant wall. He wants to take our money and then destroy us. That old fox has become more and more cunning since he left our consortium. I didn't think that he would be so cunning before. Mark slowly said, Father, how about we negotiate with them? Even if we give them 1 million gold coins, they won't pose any threat to us. But if we agree with them, then they will think that we really believe in their words. It will be helpful for our assassination operation. Once the kid is dead, then we will make the old fox spit out the things. George nodded. Yes, but we have to act real. All right. Dean called Noyce after old Fouline and others left. He told them to decline any visit. Just as he had expected, in the afternoon of the same day, various consortiums came to visit him. There were also some rich people who had somehow gotten the news, as well as knight families, who had come to congratulate him. Dean saw an endless stream of visitors from the window on the second floor. There was a trace of emotion in his eyes. He closed the curtains and continued to study. The next day, Dean looked at the morning newspaper. As he expected, he had become a master. He had produced a legendary item for the military. Most of the pages were covered by the newspaper. Even a military newspaper had reported that he had donated the legendary item steam rifle to the military. The details of last night's battle at the Golden Wall were reported below. However, the military newspaper didn't clarify the previous confession of the barbarians. It was obvious that it was too fake to publish such a report at this moment. Dean was very satisfied. The military was very smart. In addition to the military, the Temple's special report was even more exaggerated. Almost all the reports were about Dean. It included becoming a master, donating an invention, analysis of steam, kinetic energy, and so on. The masters were invited to explain the advantages and disadvantages of the new kinetic energy, and so on. There was only one report that mentioned about the war at the Golden Wall. Dean smiled. He estimated that the entire Temple of Elements was in an uproar at this moment. After the appearance of the newspaper, there should be a lot of people in the temple who were involved in the research of gas element. However, most of them had reached a bottleneck in the original system and were trying to find a new breakthrough. They weren't valuable talents. Dean looked at the reports of other consortiums. Perhaps it was because he had sent people to greet them yesterday. All the consortiums had vigorously and actively reported about him. Even a Melon Consortium had spared no effort to publicize his affairs. There was not the slightest bit of nitpicking or bad hints. Chapter 379. The same morning. Scott Consortium. Everyone was arguing fiercely in the council hall. Chase frowned as he waited for the debate to die down. He pressed his hand on the table and said, "Everyone, please be quiet." His voice immediately covered the discussion in the hall. Everyone looked at him with their mouths slightly open. Castiff said coldly, "It's over. It's meaningless to blame each other. If I remember correctly, when Rosie came back and offered to buy Master Dean's new magic at the price of a legendary item, no one agreed. What's the point of regretting it now?" Everyone had a complex expression as they heard his words. They looked at each other and sighed. Rosie, who was sitting next to Chai, sighed. She didn't take it seriously when she heard the words of Dean's young butler. That's why she only mentioned it symbolically in the council. She didn't insist on it. Perhaps if she insisted on it, then the situation would have changed. If the proposal was passed, then it would be a huge change for the Scott Consortium, the Chai family, and herself. Unfortunately, the opportunity was in front of her, but she didn't insist on it. Hey, if we had been braver, we would have been able to purchase a new divine system for the price of a legendary divine spell. How can we not dare to trade a grain of sand for a grain of gold? An old man dressed in noble attire shook his head with a bitter smile, his face full of regret. Another person said bitterly, "Initially, we mocked Master Du for being too arrogant. Now, it seems that we were too arrogant." Chai looked at the crowd and shook his head. He sighed in his heart, but he didn't feel too sad or indulge in the things he had lost. He immediately said, "Everyone, this matter is irreversible. The current priority is to have a good relationship with Master Dean. In addition, the military sent news yesterday that they need to buy a lot of steel materials. This is an unprecedented order for our consortium. Among the 6 consortiums, only our Scott Consortium is in the mineral industry. Our steel is 10 times more than the other consortiums combined. The other consortiums will take the opportunity to raise the price if they want to make money. We have to find out the base price of the other consortiums as soon as possible. We just need to raise the price a little above the normal price and grab all the orders." Everyone became serious as they heard Chai's words. However, there were still a few people who couldn't help but sigh. Phillips Avenue. Magistrate. Inside a divine official's office, there were 7 or 8 divine officials sitting inside. They would occasionally walk around and pass some documents to each other. They were all wearing the same divine official uniform. The pure white fabric was outlined with golden cloud patterns, and the cuffs were fiery red like 2 flaming clouds. They were extremely beautiful. Wow, the youngest magic master in history, my God. Hey, look, it's written here, a 16-year-old double legendary level master. Double legendary level. There aren't many masters who can make legendary items in the temple. It seems that only Master Skagan and Master Timari are able to make double legendary level items. So he is the 3rd master with 2 legendary level items? You said he was a traitor and colluded with the barbarians. I thought it was very strange. Why would a high-ranking oracle collude with the barbarians? Look, he even donated a legendary divine spell for free. If such a person said he would collude with the barbarians, I wouldn't believe it. You guys, you call yourselves priests. Before there's any evidence, any appearance is false. It can't be used as evidence, let alone as a reference. What do you mean? Do you suspect him of colluding with barbarians? I didn't say that. I don't agree with him colluding with barbarians. I don't think he is a good person. In short, the evidence is the truth. I only believe in the evidence. Well, I want to talk to you, idiot. In the office, 3 to 5 priests gathered together. They were holding the newspaper and talking. In the corner, a slender figure was sitting in front of her desk. Her beautiful hair was combed to the back of her robe. She quietly looked at the newspaper in her hand with a quiet smile on her face. She said to herself in a very low voice, "I knew you wouldn't do such a thing. You're not that kind of person. You yearn for peace. Everyone has wronged you." Speaking up to this point, his expression suddenly turned gloomy. "I've also wronged you in the past." She was silent for a moment as she slowly turned the newspaper. Suddenly, a report fell in her eyes. Her face turned pale. Go to the battlefield. It was raining again. On the Golden Wall. Auburn looked at the rain falling from the dark clouds in the sky. His tired face was pale. He had been commanding the battle for several days without any rest. The dark clouds hanging over their heads were like the god of death hovering in the sky, always looking down at them. His heart tightened every time the rain fell, because it was the signal to start the war. Pass down my order. Get all the soldiers to focus and defend the city walls with all their might. Auburn clenched the edge of the high wall. He gritted his teeth and said, "If the wall is there, we will be there. If the wall falls, we will die. We have no way to retreat. We have to fight." Yes. Adjutant Jun Lang bowed his head and left. As the rain gradually became heavier, the barbarian army that was stationed more than 10 miles away on the plain in front of the Golden Wall was advancing in a majestic manner. Like the rising tide, they swept towards the already damaged Golden Wall. Auburn took a deep breath. The cold air flowed from his nose into his lungs. He pulled out his sword and roared, "Shoot!" Whiz, whiz, whiz. The black arrows flew out like a curtain of rain, enveloping the plains outside the Golden Wall. After that, they fell rapidly, and the barbarians who were charging at the forefront were immediately thrown off their horses. They were pierced by the sharp arrows, and countless of them were killed or injured. However, there were some barbarians who were holding shields. They used the shield to block the arrows and successfully rushed all the way to the high wall. There were more than 100 figures standing under the high wall. All of them were wearing armor that was different from that of the soldiers. It was the hunter's armor. Their weapons were also different from the standard weapons of the soldiers. There were whips, swords, spears, hammers, and so on. They are here again. Sergei's face was full of blood. His hair was messy. His armor was damaged in several places. He was holding a long spear. His eyes were coldly staring at the barbarians in front of him. He slowly clenched the spear that was covered with blood. Gwyneth held her sword in silence. "Ready." Sergei looked back at her. Gwyneth nodded slightly. "You defend, I attack." Roar! Roar! The shield-wielding barbarians roared as they charged forward. Some of them were crushed to death by the boulders that were hurled down from the Golden Wall before they could even get close. The rest of them were lucky enough to survive the boulders and successfully reach the foot of the Golden Wall. "Kill!" Hundreds of hunters roared in unison. They pulled out their weapons and roared towards the barbarians. In the castle, Dudian was leaning on the bed. His body was covered with a heavy quilt. He was holding the super chip reader in his hand. It was drizzling outside the window, but he was unaware of it. He felt a little cold, so he asked the maid to add another quilt for him. "Why is it so cold today?" Dudian frowned, but didn't think much about it. He continued to immerse himself in the huge knowledge base of the super chip. Knock. He didn't know how long it took before someone knocked on the door. Dudian looked up and saw a human figure outside the wooden door. "What's the matter?" Chapter 380. So fast. Dean frowned and thought for a moment. He put away the super chip and card reader and put them back into the closet. He took off his coat from the rack and put it on. He opened the door and looked at Noyce. "I'm not feeling well. Help me to go down and have a look." "Are you not feeling well?" Noyce was surprised. "Master, what's wrong with you?" "I'll call the doctor." Dudian winked at him and pulled his arm around his own. Noyce was startled, but immediately understood. He supported Dean's arm, but his heart was full of doubts. Dean came to the stairs and looked in the direction of the strange smell. He saw an officer sitting in the living room. There were 3 silver medals on his shoulder. He was about 40 years old and had a well-proportioned figure. The officer heard the movement from the stairs and looked up. He saw Dean, who was supported by Noyce. He jumped up from the chair and saluted. "Heavy Feather Camp, Reed. Greetings, Master Dean." Dean coughed as he went down the stairs. "Hello. Are you the person responsible for guarding me?" Reed nodded. "I'm the captain of the guards. My task is to protect Master Dean. I hope that you can cooperate with us on the battlefield. Don't do dangerous things." Dean sat on the chair next to him and motioned him to sit. "How many guards are there?" Reed replied. "There are a total of 20 people in the guards." "Master Dean, please don't worry. The members of the guards are elites selected from the ace battalions. There are top talents in various fields. One of them won't be a problem. They can absolutely protect your life. Dean nodded and asked, "Is everyone here?" Reed shook his head. "They are waiting for you at the starting point. I came to pick you up." Dean coughed. "I haven't been feeling well since yesterday. I think it's because of the continuous rain in the past few days. Maybe I caught a cold. I don't know if I can wait for my body to get better before we go to the battlefield." Reed had long noticed that Dean seemed to be in poor health. He nodded. "Of course. Master Dean can rest at home if you're not feeling well. Do you need me to call the military doctor?" No. Dean said, "It's just a small problem. I have seen him, and he should recover soon. Military doctors are too precious during the war. Let them take care of the wounded soldiers. They are the ones who need to be taken care of." Reed was startled. There was a trace of respect in his eyes. "Master Dean is as kind and benevolent as the rumors say. You can rest assured. If you want to go, then inform us at any time. But I personally hope that Master Dean can recuperate in peace and take good care of his body. The battlefield is too dangerous. Although there won't be any danger because of our protection, but if there is an accident, it will be a loss to the temple and everyone." Dean coughed. "I appreciate your kindness, but I'm sorry to let you come here in vain. It's nothing." Reed shook his head. Dean asked the servants to send Reed out of the castle. He went back upstairs and looked at Noyce, tell the informant stationed in the front line to increase the frequency of news transmission. "The Golden Wall is about to fall. We have to grasp the news as soon as possible." Yes. Another day passed. In the morning papers, the situation of the battle at the Golden Wall was once again on the headlines. However, after several days of continuous battles, the Golden Wall had been broken and was on the verge of collapsing. There were also barbarians breaking through the Golden Wall, but before they could run far, they were surrounded and annihilated by the military. However, the situation was not optimistic. There was a page about Dean under the headlines of the Golden Wall. He was the only non-combatant who could appear in the newspapers during this special period. In addition to the news about Dean himself, there was more about the introduction and production process of his new invention, steam gun. Legendary invention. The name alone was enough to arouse the expectations of countless civilians and nobles, especially in this tense and harsh defensive war. The steam gun was a legendary invention that hadn't appeared for many years. In addition, there was news about the establishment of the second line of defense near the river. There were also news about the generals who died in the disaster. Dean curled up in a quilt after reading the morning paper. He was holding the history book of the giant wall of Sylvia. His super-sensitive hearing allowed him to hear the conversations of the servants in the castle. From time to time, he could hear the shouts coming from the front of the castle. He could see the front door of the castle from the window. There was a large group of people standing there. All of them were dressed like civilians. There were only a few blonde figures who looked like nobles. It was different from the previous curses. Now, there were cheers and words of encouragement. The people who had come to the front of the castle had completely disappeared since the newspaper had published his name. Instead, a large number of admirers had come to the castle. Such a change surprised and made the servants in the castle very happy. Dean wasn't surprised. He was quite annoyed by the noise as it affected his reading. At 10 o'clock, a secret letter was sent to Dean's room by Noyce. It was handed to Dean, who was lying on the bed. Dean took the letter and read it. His eyes were still staring at the secret letter. He quickly said, "Noyce, write to the military and tell them that I'm going to go to war." Noyce's face changed. Dean had said that the Golden Wall would collapse when he went to war. Obviously, the Golden Wall had collapsed in this drizzling weather. Yes. Noyce turned and ran away. He looked up at the air in front of him. His eyebrows slightly wrinkled as he said to himself, "You too, don't let me down." He took out a match from the drawer of the bedside desk and lit the secret report. After the secret report was burned to ashes, he lifted the quilt and got out of bed. He put on a set of knight's armor that he had made in advance. He put on his sword and hunter's bow and quiver on his shoulder. He looked at himself in front of the mirror. He had delicate facial features and black hair. At the moment, his posture was straight and his appearance was full of vigor and fighting spirit. He looked like an excellent knight. Dean was quite satisfied. He opened the door and went out. The joints of the armor rubbed against each other as he walked. Metal boots made continuous thumping sounds as he stepped on the ground. Dean went downstairs and stood in the hall. The servants were surprised to see Dean's appearance. Some of the younger girls were blushing and didn't dare to look at him. Master Dean, are you going out?" Jake stammered as he saw Duddy in. Dean nodded and patted his shoulder. "You will take care of the old man. His legs are inconvenient, so you should help him." Yes. Jake was flattered. Dean's every move seemed to be full of majesty since he became a master. Jake was in awe of Dean. He didn't think that there was anything strange about Dean's words. Dean nodded and asked the servant to bring him a raincoat. He put it over the armor like a cloak. "Master, the carriage is ready for you," a servant said in a trembling voice. Dean said, "I'm going to war. Why do I need a carriage? Bring me a horse." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.